Chapter 476. This is clearly the Overlord's force. Mrs. Gao looked at the wound and turned to look deeply at Yi Chongqing. Principal Yi, with your cultivation level you should be able to recognize it, right? This kind of Overlord's force that constantly accumulates to form destruction. Other than the Xiang family. Who else can use it? Yi Chongqing said indifferently, sister-in-law, please be careful with your words. This kind of force can only be said to have the same effect as the Overlord's force. What's more, there are really too many people who can use this kind of force. He looked at Mrs. Gao and said indifferently, the Dongfang family, the Wu family, the Nan family, the Beigong family, the Shangguan family, the Gongsun family, the Imperial family, and the Yu family, and even your family, as long as they have some understanding of this kind of force, they can all use it. Mrs. Gao's face changed every time Yi Chongqing said a name. Especially when she heard the last three names, the Imperial family and the Yu family. Mrs. Gao's face immediately changed and she said somewhat pleadingly, Principal Yi, you don't have to say any more. Yi Chongqing looked at her indifferently and then looked at everyone present. Everyone lowered their heads under his gaze. Actually, I don't understand. Xiang Quangren has already proven his innocence with facts. Why is your Gao family still clinging to the Overlord's force? What's the point of this? The facts have already proven that this matter has nothing to do with the Xiang family. But your Gao clan just won't let it go. You keep talking about the tyrannical strength and tyrannical strength. Let me give you a piece of advice. Instead of focusing on the Xiang clan, why don't you focus on those clans I just mentioned and investigate them one by one? Yi Chongqing said indifferently, maybe you can really find the murderer. Who knows? Mrs. Gao's face became even paler. A young man from the Gao family couldn't help but feel indignant and said, we'll definitely investigate. Since they're all suspects, we'll investigate them one by one. Don't tell me my grandfather is innocent. Shut up, Mrs. Gao shouted. Her voice and tone were extremely strict and even trembling a little. She turned to look at Yi Chongqing and said in a low voice, Big brother Yi, this child doesn't know any better and is talking nonsense. Please don't take it to heart. Yi Chongqing said indifferently, of course I won't tell anyone. However, the upbringing of your Gao clan really needs to be strengthened. These words can only be said in Fenghai. If you still dare to say such words in Shangjing, it's hard to say when the Gao clan will cease to exist. There are many clans whose names cannot be mentioned, let alone investigated. Sister-in-law, you should understand the stakes involved. There's a saying in the ancient times. Prospering a family is like picking up soil with a needle, and squandering a family is like pushing sand with water. However, there's another saying. Destroying a family only requires one word. Yi Chongqing flicked his sleeves and turned around saying, Zhuoshaduo, go up and take a look at Vice President Gao. It's a waste of time. There's no need to look. Zhuoshaduo smiled and said, I've already seen it clearly. Oh, everyone's eyes were focused on Zhuoshaduo. The Gao clan has been schemed against this time. Zhuoshaduo smiled bitterly and said, the same roots are frying each other, and the same family is fighting each other. Whether it's judging from physiognomy or qi observation technique, it's all the same. The key problem now should be the feng shui of the Gao clan in Fenghai. It's a trap set by someone. If we're not careful, the entire clan will be wiped out. Cough, cough, cough. Yi Chongqing covered his mouth and coughed repeatedly. Zhuoshaduo hurriedly shut his mouth. Madame Gao's brows furrowed as she thoughtfully swept her gaze around. There were almost 100 people in the room. There were too many people and too many people. Yi Chongqing said, Sister-in-law, it's not good for too many people to know about this. Mrs. Gao nodded and said, eldest, second and third stay. The rest of you leave. Another middle-aged man said unhappily, eldest mother, we're also father's sons. Why can't we listen? As soon as he opened his mouth, the other 10 or so sons immediately echoed his words. Mrs. Gao shouted sternly, all of you leave. But still no one moved. Second madam persuaded tactfully, eldest sister, we're all family. What's there that can't be said between family members? Besides, what that child said is terrifying. It's related to the life and death of our family. Let everyone listen and know the seriousness of this matter. It's better to brainstorm and deal with it. The other madams also chimed in. Yes, eldest sister. Everyone is concerned about our family. Eldest sister, no matter how bad we are, we can't ruin our family's affairs. Yes, eldest sister, why do you have to? Mrs. Gao closed her eyes, the veins on her forehead throbbing. After a long time she said, second generation stay. The rest of the younger generation leave. I'm telling you can stay, but when I don't let you speak, if anyone dares to make a sound, get out immediately. Fiske. Some people began to murmur in dissatisfaction. But from the grandsons onwards they had all gone out. All the sons' wives had also gone out. The large room suddenly became much emptier. But there were still many people present. There were more than 10 wives and 23 sons. Even with Yi Chongqing's composure, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. He looked up at the ceiling and sighed in his heart. Sigh, Vice Principal Gao must have had a hard time on a daily basis. No wonder he's so thin. If it were me. Principal Yi shuddered and didn't dare to think about it anymore. Zhou Xiaoduo looked at these people and frowned. Madam Gao, is there a Qi watcher in the magistrate's house? There are some things that you can't believe whatever I say. After all, different professions are worlds apart. Mrs. Gao's eyes flashed. She said, go and ask Master Peng to come here. After a while, a thin and tall old man hurried in. Madam. Yes, this is Master Zhou. He said that there's a problem with our family's feng shui. He wants to discuss it with you. Mrs. Gao was a shrewd and smart person. She didn't say that they were being targeted or schemed against. She just talked about the feng shui. It was obvious that Master Peng would leave the room after the discussion was over. He would not participate in the following conversation. Of course, if Zhou Xiaoduo was pointed out and said that he was talking nonsense, there would be no point in continuing the conversation. Master Peng frowned. There's a problem with the feng shui? How could it be? Then, he suddenly became alert. What problem could there be with the feng shui? The feng shui of the Gao family was all set up by me. Took me a long time to do it. This guy is talking nonsense. Zhou Xiaoduo raised his head and looked at the old man. He saw that the old man's aura was shallow, and although there was no treachery between his brows, his foundation was shallow. He was just an ordinary person, and his martial arts cultivation was also insignificant. That unique aura of a qi-gazing warrior was as calm as water, without any ripples. He said that it took him a long time to do it. He's just an idiot. Zhou Xiaoduo snorted in his heart and made a judgment in an instant. This kind of person could fool ordinary people, ordinary warriors, and even people who were at a higher level but didn't know anything. After all, a Qi watcher was a rare profession, 1 in 10,000. With Zhou Xiaoduo's current level of attainment, it was difficult for this person to catch his eye. Although this person's attainment might be a little better than the Qi watchers that Zhou Xiaoduo saw in Phoenix City who were invited by the Meng and Yi families. But his level was at most the same as the two beside Gu Luoyan. Zhou Xiaoduo had completely inherited the legacy of Blind Hong, and He Yuanyue. He had also stuffed almost all the books on Qi watchers in the continent into his mind, and mastered them through a comprehensive study. However, this person was still not good enough. He was far from being good enough. This courtyard was arranged by you, right? Zhou Xiaoduo said. The area here is not small. Everything is arranged according to the rules. The only thing I want to ask is, when was the pond in the front courtyard dug? Pond? Master Peng suddenly realized. You mean the Imperial Dragon Pond in front? Imperial Dragon Pond? Zhou Xiaoduo snorted. You call such a small pond the Imperial Dragon Pond? Have you seen how big a dragon is? Master Peng said angrily, what do you know? A dragon can be big or small. It can fly or hide. It has already jumped out of the confines of a small place. The pond is located in the southwest of the house. The shape of the octagonal pond is also okay. The rockery protrudes out of the water. It is high in the middle and low in the sides. The deepest water level is only 1.5 meters. It is also okay. The Dragon Gate fish is the finishing touch. Can be called a genius. But I don't know if you have forgotten that the original terrain of this place is not low? Zhou Xiaoduo asked. When Master Peng heard this, he frowned and thought for a moment. His expression did not change at all. How can I not know this? But this place is very comprehensive. There is only one flaw. Principal Gao and I went to find an expert to guide us. In the north of the pond, a sun and moonstone was placed to stabilize the terrain. There are no more flaws. Stabilize the terrain? There are no more flaws? Zhuo said. I don't know which expert's guidance is. Chapter 477. After listening to Zhuo's sarcastic words, Master Pang's face suddenly turned pale. Even his eyes were filled with panic. He was also an expert in the way of qi observation. How could he not know that Zhuo was telling the truth? Master Pang, don't tell me you don't know the origin of the Sun and Moon Stone? But isn't the pass you're building now the Sun and Moon Pass? Zhuo said, the so-called Sun and Moon Stone is a stone brought back from the Sun and Moon Pass. It's mixed with thousands of years of heroic qi and can indeed suppress all evil spirits. But you erected this pass in this position. I think the Sun and Moon Stone you used as the foundation stone most likely has blood on it, right? Zhuo asked in a low voice. Although he was probing, his tone was firm. Yes, there's blood. Master Pang was completely dejected at this moment. He was an expert in this field after all. He already knew that he had indeed made a mistake. Even if this mistake was not a common one, he still did not see it. But at that time there was an authoritative figure guiding him. He firmly believed in it and acted according to the law. How could there be such a big mistake now? Zhuo continued to ask, is the blood on the stone the blood of the people of the Umno Alliance? Or the blood of the martyrs of the astral souls? Master Pang's face became paler and paler. This I don't know. Then who brought this Sun and Moon Stone back? Inside the pass? Outside the pass? Inside the pass? Or under the pass? Zhuo said. Don't tell me you don't even know this? I still don't know. Master Pang was dejected. This Sun and Moon Stone was bought by Principal Gao from that master. It's said that the master once made a spell on it. It's far better than the ordinary Sun and Moon Stone. Zhuo laughed. The mountains become shallow valleys, and the water in front of the pass is shallow. Can this still be called the Imperial Dragon Pond? The Imperial Dragon Pond has long become the Hidden Dragon Pond. How dare this small and shallow pond with no water hide the dragon? Where should I put the Sun and Moon Stone in the most basic and routine operation? You don't need me to teach you this, do you? Master Pang's face turned even paler as he muttered. But at that time, the intention was to suppress the terrain of the Dragon Pond. Yes, even if I agree with you on this point, where are the people? Human. Master Pang's eyes were filled with panic as he said, back then, that great master said that if a heroic spirit exists, it will protect us for 1,000 years. Protect for 1,000 years? Alright, then I'll protect him for 1,000 years. But in terms of direction, who is he protecting? The one protecting, Master Pang said dejectedly, is the Imperial Dragon Pond. This I don't understand. Protect the Imperial Dragon Pool. Protect this pool from destruction for thousands of years? Then where is the suppression coming from? Zhuo asked one question after another. Master Pang was sweating profusely. When was this pool dug? Back then, when I was buying property here. I first bought the garden and the land. Then the main building was built and slowly took shape. 3 years after I moved in, it was about 17 years ago. Master Pang was now answering all the questions. Obviously, he was trying his best to make up for his mistakes. 17 years ago? That can't be right. Zhuo snorted and said, in my opinion, the small spirit ginseng in front of the pass should have been deliberately left behind back then, right? It should have been discovered when they were digging that there were spirit herbs here. In order not to damage the earth veins here, they chose to leave it behind. It's the end of autumn now, and the leaves are red. This kind of red sign can only be seen after at least 18 winters, right? It should have only been pink before, right? So, how can it be 17 years? The pool was dug in the winter 18 years ago. Master Pang was sweating profusely. At that time, this small spirit ginseng had just sprouted and had its first leaf. Zhuo said lightly, do you know why I said 18 years? Because this kind of small spirit ginseng has the best medicinal effect when it's 20 years old. If it's 20 years old, it should be used, and it won't collide with the earth energy here anymore. However, it takes at least 18 years for the leaves to turn red, or even 19 years, but it can't be 17 years like you said. Yes. Master Pang was more and more convinced. It's been 18 years. It's a pit. Counting from the moment it was formed. The Gao family has been in this pit for 18 years. Zhou Xiaoduo sneered. The disaster only happened 18 years later. Vice Principal Gao's fate is quite good. He can actually suppress this place for 18 years. There should be other good things in the room that can suppress fate, right? Is there an ancestral tablet in the ancestral house? Master Pang couldn't answer this question. On the side, Mrs. Gao said carefully, yes, when we came from Shangjing, we invited an ancestral tablet from the ancestral house to be worshipped here. There's also a jade rui that the ancestor of the main family carried with him. It's also worshipped. Mrs. Gao's tone was much more respectful now. She even sounded a little cautious. Madame Gao has contributed a lot to the Gao family. Zhou Xiaoduo sighed and said, I think Vice Principal Gao has a high position and is busy with many people. He probably doesn't have the time to burn incense for his ancestors every day. And the only one who has the qualifications to do this all year round is Teacher Gao's wife. I think the incense hasn't stopped for so many years, right? It's probably because of this that we've been able to maintain peace for 18 years. Otherwise, I'm afraid something would have happened long ago. Mrs. Gao said sincerely. Master's eyes are as bright as torches. Everything is within your expectations. It's true. The incense has never stopped for 18 years. And it's really done by me. The other ladies were also shocked at this moment. They looked at Zhou Xiaoduo in disbelief. How amazing! She clearly didn't see anything, but she was able to explain everything so clearly. He believed that such trivial family matters would not be recorded in any intelligence, but he was still able to see through everything. Even the information from 20 years ago was revealed one by one. Such methods were truly unfathomable. Master, may I ask why Madame Gao? Master Pang wasn't asking a question. He was asking humbly and sincerely. If Vice Principal Gao, who is in a high position, has been burning incense every day for 18 years as the head of the family, with such sincerity and effort, coupled with his status, filial piety, and the spirit of the ancestors, how could he only have 18 years of peace? Zhou Xiaoduo said, doesn't this mean that Vice Principal Gao himself doesn't have such filial piety? On the other hand, only his wife can make up for it. The others can't do it. They don't have the qualifications and they don't have the fate. Even if it's a son, it's still not enough. Mrs. Gao's eyes flashed with an indescribable light. She looked at Zhou Xiaoduo with more respect and intimacy. If you still have doubts, you can drain the water of the hidden dragon pond. I'm sure that there must be something that Vice Principal Gao always carried with him under the pond, Zhou Xiaoduo said lightly. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Mrs. Gao said, these years, whenever old Gao is in a bad mood, he will drink in the pavilion on the lake. When he's drunk, he will grab something and throw it down. I don't know how many there are. There must be more than one or two things in here. Then that's it. Zhou Xiaoduo said, there's a problem with the feng shui of the house. The shadow of the ancestors can't cover it anymore. Of course, the wrong guidance at the beginning and the trap set up are the main reasons for today's change. Putting the sun and moon stone on the opposite side to form two opposite sides. Hee. Mrs. Gao. Zhou Xiaoduo was about to say something, but he suddenly stopped and said, since Master Pang knows the problem, you must know what to do next. Master Pang, you've worked hard this time. Why don't you go back first? Master Pang was convinced and said, yes, I'll take my leave. I hope to have the opportunity to ask for your advice in the future. Zhou Xiaoduo smiled and said, I value karma the most when I do things. You'd better wait until you get past the Gao family before you talk about the follow-up. Master Pang's heart trembled. He raised his head and saw Mrs. Gao's cold eyes. His heart skipped a beat and he said sadly, I'm not good enough and caused the main family to suffer such a loss. No matter what punishment there is, I'll accept it calmly. Zhou Xiaoduo said lightly, however, the main reason for this matter is that Vice Principal Gao brought it upon himself. It's not right to put all the blame on you. Master Pang's eyes were full of gratitude. With Zhou Xiaoduo's words, his life was most likely saved. Especially since the Gao family still needed him to change the feng shui pattern of the house. Killing him was no different from digging their own grave. Thinking of this, He bowed respectfully to Zhuo again and then said to Mrs. Gao, "Madam, I'll go to the backyard and wait for your orders." Then he walked out backwards. However, as he moved, his body was already a little hunched, no longer as straight as it was in the beginning. Mrs. Gao sighed and said, "Master Zhuo, what do you think?" "Mrs. Gao, please don't call me that again. It's too much." Zhuo said modestly, "However, this matter really has nothing to do with Master Pang. With his own skills, he really can't set up such a clever feng shui pattern. Looking at the whole continent, there are only a few people who can see the danger of the so-called Imperial Dragon Pond's feng shui pattern. Basically, people who come to take a look will think that there's wind and water to gather wealth and fortune from all directions. It's a proper feng shui pattern. There's another thing. Master Pang mentioned several times just now that the key item, the Sun and Moonstone, was Vice Principal Gao's maze. This part is most likely true. In other words, the current situation is largely due to Vice Principal Gao's own actions. He brought disaster upon himself. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Zhuo said, "As for Master Pang, I have another consideration. I just mentioned that I'm most concerned about karma. It's not convenient for me to personally change the feng shui pattern of the Gao family. The karma of this matter is too heavy. I know I can't afford to get involved. However, whoever started the trouble should end it. I need Master Pang's help to reverse it. Mrs. Gao, please don't do anything stupid because of a moment of recklessness." Mrs. Gao sighed disappointedly. Zhuo's words were very clear and thorough. I can't afford to get involved in the karma of this matter. In fact, what he meant was, I won't help with this matter anymore. Pointing out the key to the maze is already the limit of my power. To put it bluntly, this matter is very likely to be a plan made by Vice President Gao and others. It's just that the other party is more skillful and beat Vice President Gao at his own game. They abandoned Vice President Gao to make the plan more thorough and the result more ideal. If Vice President Gao has recovered now, I won't even say these words. I won't even come here today, because that will prove that he is committing treason. But if he doesn't wake up, he can still take a look. Zhuo sighed softly. This is a serious matter. Xiaoduo doesn't dare to say too much. I hope Mrs. Gao can forgive me. Master, what are you talking about? Mrs. Gao said. Today Brother Yi and Master Zhuo came here to give me real advice. Master Zhuo's words are sincere. I can't thank you enough. There's one more thing about Vice President Gao waking up. I may see it, but the person who set the trap may see it. If he doesn't want to be exposed in front of others and be punished by Vice President Gao in the future, I'm afraid he will make more moves. Therefore, Vice President Gao will still be in danger during this period. Zhuo said meaningfully, it's very important to take care of him during this period. Mrs. Gao felt a chill in her heart. Student Zhuo, can you please say it more clearly? Zhuo chuckled. I can't. I can't? The startled light in Mrs. Gao's eyes flickered, and then she looked pensive. On the other side, second madam said, Master Zhuo, can you really be sure that my old Gao will wake up in 7 days to half a month? Zhuo said somewhat playfully, according to the current treatment. As long as there are no accidents and he doesn't wake up when the time comes, everyone can treat what I said before as a lie. I'm only a student of Hidden Dragon High School. Second madam, are you afraid that I'll run away? No matter what, I still have to stay in Fenghai for at least 4 years. Second madam laughed dryly. You're joking. At this moment there was a sudden commotion outside. It was so loud that it was unexpected. What happened? Mrs. Gao said sternly. Someone came in from outside in a panic, madam. It's the 35th young master, 39th young master, and young master Pingyun. The 3 of them have been sent back. They've already passed. What? Hearing this news, the room immediately exploded. Quiet! Mrs. Gao shouted sternly. What are you panicking for? At this moment, the first thing that came to her mind was what Xiaoduo had just said. The Gao family's fate is weakening, and it's showing signs of waning. As the head of the family is seriously injured and unconscious, it's getting harder and harder to use our own fate to suppress the family's fate. The Gao family's fate is falling apart, and it's difficult to continue. Looking at the faint signs of blood, the master. In the near future, the family will have an unexpected disaster, and there will be family members dying one after another. This sentence was still ringing in their ears, deafening them. In just a moment, the news of death had already spread, and 3 people had died at once. Find someone who understands the situation, and explain the situation. Mrs. Gao shouted sternly. Everyone else, don't act rashly. Don't make a sound. Also, no one from the Gao family is allowed to leave the Gao family's old house. From now on, no one is allowed to leave the Gao family's house. Sinew. Mrs. Gao called her eldest son. You're in charge of monitoring. If anyone dares to leave without permission, punish them severely. It's better to let them go unpunished. No matter who it is, break their legs. Yes, mother. Gao Sinew agreed and walked out. A moment later, a middle-aged man covered in injuries came in. The 3 young masters were originally drinking at the First Glory Club, and it seemed that there were a few outsiders next door. Then for some reason a hostess went over there. Then, the 3 young masters were unhappy and they quarreled and fought, and the other party was especially ruthless. In just one move, the 3 young masters' heads were twisted off by the other party. The middle-aged man's face was pale, and blood flowed out of his mouth as he spoke. We were at the door. By the time we realized something was wrong and wanted to help, it was already too late. Mrs. Gao's body swayed, and she gritted her teeth. Do you know who the other party is? I don't know. There were only 2 of them, and after the incident, they beat all of us until we vomited blood and fell to the ground in one move. Then the other party left, and by the time we chased after them, they were already long gone. Mrs. Gao fell silent. The monstrous anger that had suddenly erupted earlier was slowly being restrained. After a long while, she gritted her teeth. Serves them right. Their great-grandfather is still unconscious, and they were actually interested in going to the clubhouse to find a hostess in broad daylight. It's good that they died. First, gather the clubhouse's surveillance cameras, then wait for old Gao to wake up, then we'll talk about the follow-up. Put this matter aside for now. Also, immediately summon all the members of the Gao family who are outside and have them return as soon as possible. Even if there's an important matter, they are not allowed to stay outside. As long as they return, they are not allowed to leave the old mansion again. If she only believed 70 to 80% of Zhuo Xiaoduo's words earlier, then now she believed his words to 120%. Master Zhuo. Mrs. Gao took a deep breath. Now that things have come to this, we're in a mess. I wonder if Master Zhuo can give us some pointers. The entire Gao family will be grateful to you. Zhuo Xiaoduo smiled bitterly. Mrs. Gao, I'm just a student, and my experience is shallow. When have I experienced so many storms and waves? But I feel that your actions are decisive and clear-cut. Now, no matter what is at stake, it's not as important as Vice Principal Gao waking up smoothly. There's something going on outside, but if too many people go out, it's possible that nothing will happen at home. Zhuo Xiaoduo said lightly. As for the urgent matter, I feel that it's better to stay on the defense and wait for reinforcements. Ignore everything. If we can ask for a few reliable experts from the main family from Shangjing to come over while we stay on the defense, it should be the best plan for now. Mrs. Gao's eyes lit up. Not bad, not bad. Yi Chongqing said lightly. Sister-in-law, as an outsider, I shouldn't interfere in your family's plans. But if you want old Gao to wake up safely, the people who come must be. Haha. Yi Chongqing smiled and said, if there's nothing else, sister-in-law, we'll take our leave. Mrs. Gao pondered Yi Chongqing's words for a moment, then said, Brother Yi, please stay for a while. We've seen what old Gao has done all these years. Today Brother Yi brought Master Zhuo here to give us pointers. This is a great favor. Although our Gao family is in decline now, and we can't distinguish between friends and foes on all sides, and danger lurks everywhere. But there are some things that we still have to express. If Brother Yi and Masters will return empty-handed, I'm afraid that our Gao family won't have the face to continue living in Fenghai City. She said lightly, please take a seat. Then she got up and went into the inner room. Looking for monthly tickets, recommendation tickets, and subscriptions. Chapter 479. Half an hour later, Yi Chongqing, Li Chenglong, and Zhou Xiaoduo sat in the car on their way back. The three of them looked at each other in silence. When they arrived at Zhou Xiaoduo's villa, the three of them got off the car and walked into the villa. Zhou Xiaoduo chuckled. The Gao family is really generous. Li Chenglong scratched his head and said, I didn't do anything the whole time, but I still got 500 top-grade jade of astral souls. Haha. The Gao family had given them 3 gifts this time. Although Li Chenglong had only introduced himself during the whole process, this gift was still very valuable, and he didn't forget to give it to him. I have a sword here. It can be said to be a divine weapon. I also have 1,000 pieces of high-grade star soul jades. There's also 1,000,000 star origin coins in cash. This is a high-grade ancient compass used to look at qi. Zhou Xiaoduo said. Looks like Mrs. Gao really put in a lot of effort and put in a lot of money. Yi Chongqing smiled and said, she didn't just put in a lot of money. I also got 3 pieces of top-grade jade of astral souls. Principal, you're the one who got a huge windfall. That's 6 billion. Zhou Xiaoduo's eyes lit up. It's not too much to ask for a share of 1 billion, right? Get lost. Yi Chongqing scolded him. What do you need so much money for? Is it for food? You don't know, but I'm so poor that I don't even have food to eat. Zhou Xiaoduo said. Yi Chongqing reached out and knocked him on the head. The three of them had just sat down when Yi Chongqing urged Li Chenglong to boil some tea. Then he frowned and thought about what had happened that day. When the tea was ready, Principal Yi said, the two of you went to the Gao family today. What do you think of the Gao family? What do you think of this matter? Yi Chongqing no longer dared to treat Zhou Xiaoduo and Li Chenglong as children. Most of the time, the sensitivity of these two people to the development of the situation was even better than his own. When Yi Chongqing was discussing matters, he used a tone and attitude that was completely on equal footing and standing on equal footing. Zhuo, why don't you go first? Li Chenglong frowned and said, I don't know how to look at aura, so there are many things that I don't know. Let's wait for Boss Zhuo to finish, and then I'll follow Boss Zhuo's words and go deeper in that direction. Zhou Xiaoduo took a deep breath and said, regarding this matter, I sincerely feel that Gao Zhiyun, Vice Principal Gao, is a blessed person. Blessed person. Yi Chongqing and Li Chenglong were puzzled by Zhou Xiaoduo's statement. Why did he bring this up? This matter. If we were to talk about it based on the laws of fortune, the Gao family would be destroyed. It would be a disaster that would end their bloodline. Unfortunately, Gao Zhiyun found himself a good wife. Zhou Xiaoduo laughed bitterly and said, Gao Zhiyun's first wife should be a socialite from a big family, right? Or should I say a direct descendant of a big family? Although he used a questioning tone, his tone was unusually firm. Yi Chongqing thought for a while and said, it's said that Mrs. Gao is a direct descendant of the Shiman family. Back then, for some reason, the Shiman family kept giving birth to girls. They didn't have a son for decades. It was so extreme that even Marshal Shiman was anxious. And this Madame Gao was one of the daughters of the Shiman clan back then. However, although she was born of the first wife, she was far behind in the order of the first wife's birth. Moreover, there were hundreds of maidservants in the Shiman clan, so she was already annoyed and didn't care much about the other daughters in the clan. Yi Chongqing chuckled and said, back then, the Heavenly King of the Right almost died of laughter. He even wrote a poem for Marshal Shiman to make it a joke. However, that was the truth. Marshal Shiman couldn't do anything to the Heavenly King of the Right. Haha. Yi Chongqing laughed heartily. Clearly, this incident had not only caused a sensation, but had also become a popular topic of conversation. A poem? Zhou Xiaoduo was very interested. The Heavenly King of the Right had been written in textbooks. How could he not be interested in the story of this top figure? Didn't they say that the Heavenly King of the Right hated studying the most? How could he write a poem? What's the content of this poem? This poem was later suppressed by Marshal Shiman at a great cost. However, because of this, it led to the appearance of a figure even more terrifying than the Heavenly King of the Right. This made the story even more legendary. Yi Chongqing smiled and squinted his eyes. Obviously, he was also very interested in the gossip of these big shots and had a lot to talk about. Principal, hurry up and recite the poem. Don't keep us in suspense. Zhou Xiaoduo urged. Well, At that time the heavenly king of the right wrote, 800 bellies bulged like a grave. How many men died from exhaustion? 5 generations of men worked hard together for 35 years. Looking forward to 800 beatings, preparing 100,000 tons of good wine. Once the good news came from the delivery room, 800 golden flowers came out of the west gate. Ha 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 ha. Sua Xiaoduo and Li Chenglong laughed when they heard this. This limerick was really too mischievous. Yi Chongqing also laughed as he recited. Afterwards, Marshal Shimen finally managed to suppress this poem with great difficulty. He wanted to eliminate the influence of the entire nation. However, he didn't expect that Minister Zhua, who was also the Minister of Inspecting the Heavens, would add another line. Marshal Shimen was unable to suppress this line. Yi Chongqing laughed. Sky inspecting throne? Zhua Xiaoduo was confused. I don't think I've heard of this name. Cough cough. Yi Chongqing felt that he had said something wrong. He said, you don't have to worry about this. He actually didn't dare to say anything. Zhua Xiaoduo's heart itched unbearably as he asked, what is this minister talking about? Cough cough cough. Yi Chongqing felt deeply regretful. What's wrong with me today? Why did I mention this when I was so careless? Cough cough cough. He coughed for a long time. When he saw that the two's eyes were shining with curiosity, he finally put on a straight face and said, let's talk business. Why are the two of you so curious? The principal's dignity was immediately raised. Zhua Xiaoduo and Li Chenglong were speechless. How can you blame us for this? Weren't you the one who brought it up first? Just now you were so excited that we couldn't even stop you. But now you're actually covering our heads with your saliva. Don't you know that it's a crime to keep us in suspense? You're an old man who doesn't respect himself. Let's end our banter. Tell us about your discovery. This is serious business. Yi Chongqing urged Zhua Xiaoduo. It was obvious that Principal Yi didn't want to continue the previous topic. For a moment, Zhua Xiaoduo and Li Chenglong only felt that they were suffocated. The most annoying thing was to stop abruptly in the middle of a sentence. No matter how much you wanted to hear the follow-up, the other party wouldn't say a word. This was like some people writing novels. When they reached the most exciting part and the most suspenseful part, they would suddenly stop and there would be no more continuation. This kind of author was simply heartless. Fortunately, there was the most handsome head of the Feng family. He would never be like this. My discovery. Zhua Xiaoduo coughed and began to organize his words. The reason why Vice Principal Gao is said to have been schemed against by someone and was heavily injured and had almost reached the end of his road, but his family was not ruined and he even had room to maneuver, is mainly because he took advantage of his wife's luck and had the luck of her in-laws to support him. Although I still don't understand why the lucky man who married the legitimate daughter of the Shimen family dared to have so many concubines. This in itself is a strange thing. Zhua Xiaoduo stole a glance at Yi Chongqing. Obviously, he wanted to hear the follow-up and found an excuse to start the topic. Well, there's another reason. Yi Chongqing said, I'll tell you the details later. Now let's talk about business. Zhua Xiaoduo rolled his eyes. Wasn't I talking about business? But this sentence was only said in his heart. What Vice Principal Gao encountered this time was a disaster of destruction. The right time, the right place, and the right people all came at the same time. How could he be spared? The most important one came from the fact that he inexplicably stood on the opposite side of the Sun-Moon Pass. Also, he did all kinds of things to shake the talent base. The lack of people and the right people was too bad. Secondly, he began to plan for the feng shui situation nearly 20 years ago, but he didn't know that he had already fallen into the trap of someone. The first opportunity was not the first opportunity but the lost opportunity. His hometown became his weakness from the beginning. It was a loss of the right place. Then he schemed against Vice Principal Xiang. He thought that he was the one who planned the game, but in fact he was a pawn that was set to be abandoned. He suffered a heavy blow on his home ground. It was a loss of the right time. In the end he was used by others. The most important thing was that his wife was virtuous, loyal, and filial. She shielded him from many disasters and left him with a chance to live, a chance to turn things around. The saying that good and evil will be repaid in the unseen world is really true. Zhua Xiaoduo said, plus our help pointed out the maze. This time the Gao family will inevitably face a bloody disaster, but it won't really shake the foundation. But the backfire has begun to appear. After a long time, the Gao family's defeat is inevitable. Yi Chongqing frowned and said, "So what you said in the Gao family is all true? It's not an alarmist talk? Including the feng shui, qi viewing and so on, they are all true?" "Of course it's true." Zhuo Xiaoduo widened his eyes in confusion. "Why do you ask, headmaster?" "I'm Zhuo Xiaoduo. The title of Master Zhuo is not something that you can brag about. The most taboo in the Tao of fate and fate is to speak without thinking. Even if you intentionally mislead others, you must make your words sound plausible. You must never purely deceive others." Haha. Yi Chongqing laughed. "Go on." After seeing Vice Principal Gao's condition and the feng shui of the Gao family, Vice Principal Gao's injury is real. There's nothing fake about it, Zhuo Xiaoduo said solemnly. At this point he paused for a moment. Yi Chongqing nodded slowly. For a profound cultivator like Yi Chongqing, it was already clear whether the injury was real or fake, especially the injury that caused him to fall into a coma. There was no one who could lie in front of such a powerful cultivator like him, let alone in such a flawless way. As I mentioned earlier, Vice Principal Gao's injury is really fatal. The other party went all out to kill Vice Principal Gao. This is the so-called abandoned pawn. Under such circumstances, his basic conscience as a citizen of the Yanwu Empire still exists. At this time he will do everything he can to get rid of this spy. However, his action of getting rid of this spy can lead to two results. First, this spy was discovered by us a long time ago and we're using this spy to do things. By getting rid of the spy, he's getting rid of the eyes and ears of the UMNO alliance. And the second result is, he gets rid of the spy on the surface, but someone takes advantage of this gap to plant a spy who is even more covert, more difficult to deal with and more destructive, causing the chances of our side being destroyed to increase instead of decrease. Zhuo Xiaoduo said, "I don't know if you understand what I'm saying?" "Yes, we understand completely." Yi Chongqing and Li Chenglong nodded repeatedly. No matter what they do, it's wrong. Even if they have good intentions, it's wrong. Therefore, under such circumstances, all of the Gao family's actions are, in our eyes, a series of foolish moves. Even if the orders from the Gao family's headquarters were meant to be beneficial to the hidden dragon, in the hands of Vice Principal Gao, the final result of his execution will be detrimental to the hidden dragon. This is a situation that makes us speechless. The guidance of the heavenly Dao's aura is just this sinister. Fortunately, the Gao family has the protection of the Gao family's fortune, Madame Gao's own bloodline's fortune from the Shiman family's bloodline, and Gao Zhiyun's own fortune and destiny. With the combination of the three, there's no problem with his actions. Yes, in a way, this is the manifestation of the heavenly Dao's fortune of the astral souls. However, as he makes more mistakes, his own fortune is being depleted day by day. Not only is it decreasing, but it's not increasing. Also, this feng shui situation is slowly eroding the protection of the Gao family's ancestral spirits, causing the combined fortune of the three to dwindle. Once all the fortune is depleted, it'll be the end of the Gao family. No matter how loyal they are and how much fortune they have, it's useless. It can't make up for the damage they've done to the heavenly Dao's fortune. Zhuo Xiaoduo said, "This is the situation now. The Gao family's fortune of Gao Zhiyun and his descendants has been depleted. Madame Gao's bloodline and fortune of the Shiman family will also be depleted in this matter. Next, it'll be up to Vice Principal Gao to make a choice. If he can repent and break the feng shui situation on his own, he may still have a chance to survive. However, if he's still stubborn and even delusional enough to take advantage of the current situation to reap benefits, then the Gao family will be uprooted when there's a little more disturbance. Because his fortune has run out, there's no room for change. At this time, if he can't do more good deeds to protect the country and its people and accumulate fortune, the day of his downfall will be an instant." Zhuo Xiaoduo coughed and said, "I'm referring to Vice Principal Gao. Gao Zhiyun's Gao family isn't the Gao family of Fenghai City, nor is it the Gao family of Shangjing City. You can't mix up these 2 points." Yi Chongqing was baffled by what he heard. Although his cultivation was high and he had some understanding of the aura examination technique, his understanding was far from deep. At this moment, listening to Zhuo Xiaoduo's words, although it wasn't to the extent that he didn't understand much, at least not all of it. And this feeling was the most uncomfortable. It was like scratching an itch through one's boot. It was hard to enjoy. You mean, the fortune of the heavenly Tao is different? Yi Chongqing was dizzy. Only the heavenly Tao is different? There's more than one heavenly Tao? The heavenly Tao was the heavenly Tao. Why did it seem like there were two heavenly Taos? Of course there's more than one. In fact, there may be several. Zhuo Xiaoduo was puzzled. How can they be the same? How can they be different? Li Chenglong was also puzzled. Of course they're different. Zhuo Xiaoduo was speechless. Our continent is the continent of astral souls, right? Then 8 pieces were cut out, right? Yes. But 2 pieces came back later, right? Yes. The others haven't come back yet, right? Yes. Then, for example, this continent was originally a big earthworm. Zhuo Xiaoduo held a pen this time and drew a big earthworm on the white paper. This earthworm was severely injured for some reason and broke into 9 pieces. 8 of them split off, and after going through all kinds of struggles, each of them survived and became independent individuals. That is to say, they have their own destinies and destinies. Do you understand what I mean? The other piece of the 8 pieces is the main consciousness of the original earthworm. It's the continent of astral souls. Although its vitality was greatly damaged because of the departure of the 8 pieces, it's constantly healing its wounds and slowly recovering into a complete earthworm. On the other hand, the 8 pieces of the earthworm that were previously split out are constantly struggling to survive. After a long period of tempering, they finally survived and grew into complete earthworms. And at some point the 2 big earthworms of the Umno Alliance and the Tao League came back and reunited with the earthworm of the continent of astral souls. But, do you think that these 2 earthworms and the earthworm of the continent of astral souls are the same? Zhuo Xiaoduo asked. Yi Chongqing and Li Chenglong blinked and imagined this scene. Then they came to a conclusion. It's not the same. What we can be sure of is that these are 3 individual earthworms with their own thoughts, right? Zhuo Xiaoduo asked. That's right. So, isn't it obvious? 3 continents and 3 heavenly axes. What's so hard to understand? Zhuo Xiaoduo spread his hands. He really felt that this was a very simple theory. Why couldn't they understand it? Do you understand now? Zhuo Xiaoduo said. That's why there's a life and death war between the 3 continents now. Because the 3 heavenly axes are devouring each other. They all want to devour each other to strengthen themselves. As long as they succeed in devouring each other, they can take over each other's territory. It's that simple. And the earthworms have completely become different parts. If they want to reconnect to their original bodies, they have to be strong. Secondly, they have to fight each other until their flesh and blood are flying everywhere. Only then can they reconnect to their wounds and become one and complete the devouring process. Zhuo Xiaoduo explained seriously. In the end, this is the source of the endless war between the 3 continents and the unresolvable fighting spirit. Chapter 481. Because the so-called heavenly axiom is just a vague consciousness, it doesn't have the ability to fight on its own. And the 2 heavenly axioms can't fight each other directly, so they can only let the humans born from each side use the means of war and victory to plunder the other side's luck. That's why there's war. Zhuo Xiaoduo said, isn't that simple? Simple? Yi Chongqing and Li Chenglong smiled bitterly at each other. It's obviously an extremely complicated problem. I really don't know how you can see it as simple. Zhuo Xiaoduo concluded, so in my opinion, no matter how the war with the Umno Alliance ends, it's a battle for luck. And this battle for luck, I really don't know how long it'll take and when it'll end. The more we fight, the more trouble we'll have, the more hatred we'll have, and the more we won't be able to stop. So, if we wait until there's a real winner, then it'll end only when one side is annihilated or is at an absolute disadvantage. Whether the defeated side will be annihilated or not depends entirely on whether the victorious side will be merciful or not. And no one dares to bet that the other side will be merciful. So, in this war, as long as the resources aren't completely exhausted, no one will give up. Yi Chongqing's eyes were solemn as he said, according to what you said, The Tao alliance that's allied with the Astral Soul's continent is actually our enemy too? There'll be a war sooner or later. Zhuo Duo said with certainty. Anyway, in my opinion, it's an inevitable outcome. Yi Chongqing was stunned for a moment and didn't say anything. If that's the case, I really don't know what the future will be like. It's still not that far. Zhuo Duo chuckled. It's just 2 continents that have returned. The other continents, if I'm not wrong, will return sooner or later. The meteor shower that falls on the Astral Soul's continent all year round is a super resource that no force can miss. The war between the 9 continents may be long and drawn out, but they'll still be unified in the end. At that time, it will be considered a complete heavenly Tao in the true sense. So, even though this battle has been going on for many years, from what I can see, this battle of providence has only just begun. It might not be impossible for it to continue until the end of time. Zwa, your lung capacity is really good. You can actually say such a long sentence with such ease. You're also ridiculously optimistic. Now that you don't even have a wife, you're already thinking about grandchildren. Li Chenglong teased. Swollen, I feel very relaxed. Just as Wuxiao Duo had said, such a long and drawn-out war between the 2 realms might not end even after hundreds of thousands of years. He probably wouldn't be able to see it in this lifetime. Since that was the case, why should he worry too much? Zhuo Duo rolled his eyes, but he was secretly pleased. I don't have a wife? This was the biggest joke in the world. I've had a wife since I was born. Li Chenglong, what do you know? Under such circumstances, how can a cradle for talents like the Hidden Dragon High School be so easily destroyed? Whether it's for public or private reasons, it won't be allowed. Zhuo Duo said. That's why Principal Yi is very dishonest. He didn't tell us the truth at all, or rather, he didn't plan to tell us the truth at all. Yi Chongqing smiled bitterly. You little brat, you're full of tricks and you're even more sharp-tongued. Then he said softly, you're right, but this time the school is really in a precarious situation. That's true. So the higher-ups are deliberately conniving and trying to lure the snake out of its hole? Trying to catch them all in one fell swoop? Zhuo Duo asked. That's true. And the direct consequence of this is that the sacrifice of the Hidden Dragon High School will be great. Yi Chongqing's expression turned bleak. You won't know when the enemy will make a move. You can only passively wait and deal with their moves as they come. Yi Chongqing took a deep breath. The higher-ups have already chosen the next principal of the Hidden Dragon High School. They're just waiting for me to die. Then, the next principal will come and take over. Nominally, it's to stabilize the situation, but in reality, it's to continue doing this. In fact, it's not just the Hidden Dragon High School that has similar situations. Yi Chongqing said as early as 100 years ago, Yunduan High School also had similar situations. After a series of events, it returned to peace and quiet for 100 years until now. There's also the Department of Martial Arts, Star Shield, and so on. Similar situations have also happened before. It's just that they didn't pay as big a price as the Hidden Dragon High School this time. The most dangerous place for the enemy is always when they're hiding in the dark and not moving. You'll never know how deep they've penetrated and what boundary they've reached. So this time, the sudden appearance of such signs in the Hidden Dragon High School is also an excellent opportunity for us to counterattack. Yi Chongqing sneered. Otherwise, even if I, Yi Chongqing, want to focus on teaching and not care about the wind and waves, the martial arts department and the higher-ups of the empire won't let them continue to rot. And just getting rid of a few vice principals is really easy for us. It's not a problem at all. But then, the claws and fangs that the enemy has stretched out with great difficulty will be retracted again. We don't know when they'll make their next move. We can catch thieves for 1,000 days, but it's too tiring to guard against thieves for 1,000 days. Even if we guard for 1,000 days, there may not be any results. Yi Chongqing said leisurely, whether it's for public or private reasons, we can't act rashly. Once we make a move, we must catch a big fish. Otherwise, what's the meaning of so many years of sacrifice? Zhuo Duo asked curiously. But now, Mr. Principal, you're destined to not die. It's meaningless for the principal who's about to succeed you to come. But I'm still very curious. Who's the original plan? Who's qualified to take over your position? No return sword, Gu Qianfan. Yi Chongqing smiled faintly with a somewhat mischievous look. He said, just as you said, because of your interference, I'm not dead this time, but I've also cut off old Gu's chance of promotion. Haha. I see. Zhou Xiaoduo and Li Chenglong both laughed from the bottom of their hearts. Xiaoduo, what you've given me won't last long. Of course, I want to finish this matter while I'm still in office. But if I can't hold on any longer, I can only give up. And let Gu Qianfan take over. After all, the best quality jade of astral souls is too rare in the astral souls continent. Any one of them can be of great use. If we gather 100 of them and use them at the most critical moment, we can greatly increase the chances of the Empire having a cultivator above the mystical realm. But it's too wasteful to use them for this old man's sake. Yi Chongqing said leisurely. Principal, what I've given you, you're not allowed to give it to others. I'm friends with you but not others. If you're tired of living, remember to return the rest to me. Zhou Xiaoduo reminded anxiously with a pale face. This wasn't Zhou Xiaoduo flipping his intestines. He was really worried. With this old man's selfless character, who looked down on life and death, it was hard to say how much he would give away. Rather than that, Zhou Xiaoduo might as well use the best quality jade of astral souls himself. Zhou Xiaoduo's character was to be generous to his own people, but to others, he was not only stingy but also petty. It was best if he was stingy. Don't worry, kid. Yi Chongqing couldn't help but laugh. Unless it's absolutely necessary, how can I give away the things you've given me? This old man also wants to live for a few more years. Zhou Xiaoduo rolled his eyes in dissatisfaction and snorted. The old man seemed to have given him a promise, but in reality, he had left a loophole in his words. What did he mean by unless it's absolutely necessary, how can I give it away? In other words, when that time comes, you'll still give it to me without hesitation? Zhou Xiaoduo was very unhappy. What do the others have to do with me? Why should I give them so many best quality jade of astral souls? I don't have that many in total. At the thought of this, Zhou Xiaoduo couldn't help but feel regretful. He regretted giving so many best quality jade of astral souls to Yi Chongqing at once that day. He should have given him 3 or 5 yuan so that he could keep this old man alive. Now that he gave so many at once, this guy suddenly turned from a poor man to a rich man, somewhat like a nouveau riche that he actually had the idea of giving it away at such a critical time. It was true that the poor became rich. He didn't even know his surname anymore. It was a pity that it was too late to regret now. A single mistake would cause eternal regret. Sir Principal, are there so few Qi Watchers in Fenghai City? Zhou Xiaoduo asked. This was Zhou Xiaoduo's personal feeling, but it was also the sensitivity of a top Qi Watcher to his own kind. In Fenghai City, such a strong aura of a Qi Watcher had almost never appeared. It was as if this was a vacuum of Qi Watchers. So far, the only Qi Watcher that Zhou Xiaoduo had seen was Master Pang, whom he had encountered in the Gao family. Yi Chongqing smiled. You also know that this war is a battle of luck. Although Fenghai City is the ancient capital of the 8 dynasties, it has no luck to speak of. The only 8 dragon veins have already soared into the sky. Many high-level Qi Watchers have come to take a look and confirmed it again and again. Fenghai City is now just the old site of the dragon veins. At least in the next tens of thousands of years, it is impossible to breed new dragon veins. Among the luck of the dragon veins is the so-called battleground among the so-called militarists. There are no dragon veins in Fenghai City, so it is not coveted by others. Those who are really capable naturally go to places where there are still dragon veins to guard. Why are they staying here? Chapter 482. Yi Chongqing said lightly. Even General Dongfang said the same thing when he saw Fenghai. It's a pity that Fenghai no longer has a place for dragons. Of course, even if Fenghai doesn't have the dragon vein, it's still the ancient capital of the 8 dynasties. The location of the 8 dragon veins is still intact. Under the intertwining of the remaining luck, it can still cultivate many talents. So there's a hidden dragon among the 3 martial arts experts, and that's how it got its name. As the name suggests, the Hidden Dragon Academy is named the Hidden Dragon Academy, because this place is only a place to cultivate talents. Once you leave this place and reach a suitable battlefield, you will be able to transform into a dragon. However, in Fenghai, It is destined that there will never be a so-called true dragon genius. Yi Chongqing explained in detail, and then looked at Zhuo Xiaoduo meaningfully. Because last time Zhuo Xiaoduo asked him to carry him in the sky to look for the dragon veins until today, at this moment, Yi Chongqing still wanted to laugh when he thought of it. There really isn't any dragon vein, but what are you looking for? Now the places with the most dragon veins in the Astral Soul's mainland are Guangdong and Shangjing is the place where thousands of dragons return to their home. Therefore the dragon veins are the most abundant. And most of our men are stationed in Shangjing. Yi Chongqing said, as for Fenghai there are qi diviners. But it's impossible for them to be at the level of qi diviners that you're looking for. Even if they're just passing by, they won't stay here for long. Because this place is a blank space for them, and it's not worth staying for long. I see. Zhuo Xiaoduo and Li Chenglong couldn't help but feel enlightened. Zhuo Xiaoduo understood why there were so few qi watchers in this place, and there were even fewer capable ones. Li Chenglong, on the other hand, understood why Vice Principal Gao's family was so easily fooled by others, but only Zhuo Xiaoduo still had some doubts in his heart. This Fenghai, how could there be no dragon vein? It's impossible that there's no dragon vein. Otherwise, where did that Xiaolong come from? Humph, since that stingy ghost exists, then there must be karma in the world it resides in. Thinking of this, Zhuo Xiaoduo fell into deep thought. On the other hand, Li Chenglong turned to writing and drawing rapidly with a serious face. He drew some lines that Yi Chongqing could not understand at all. From time to time he would raise his head in a daze, and from time to time he would be deep in thought. After a long time it finally stopped. Li Chenglong, did you notice anything? Yi Chongqing asked. Yi Chongqing felt that Zhuo Xiaoduo had already explained everything in detail, and Li Chenglong probably had nothing more to add. However, seeing that Li Chenglong had worked so hard for so long, he still asked politely. In fact, he did not have much hope in his heart. Just now Zhuo answered a lot of my doubts through the qi observation technique in feng shui. Many things that I couldn't figure out before. I can't say that I'm suddenly enlightened, but I do have some ideas. Li Chenglong said, let's analyze the current situation from the perspective of the struggle for power between the major families and the major corporations. Li Chenglong seemed to be deliberating over his words. After pondering for a moment he said, of course in this, there must be elements of the UMNO Alliance's conspiracy. However, the UMNO Alliance's conspiracy must be based on the fact that some of the upper-class families disregarded the national crisis and fought for power to expand their family's influence. Only then can it be implemented. If it's really an iron plate, even if the UMNO Alliance has a conspiracy, it will lack the space to put it to use. Li Chenglong asked, Headmaster, is it appropriate for me to interpret it this way? Yi Chongqing said, absolutely. He sighed and said, after so many years of fighting, the conspiracies, corruption, and even battles from foreign enemies are no longer the main point. Just like what Li Chenglong said, only when a powerful country is internally in chaos and conflicts arise, will the foreign enemies have an opportunity to take advantage of it. Otherwise, if it's an iron plate, how can the foreign enemies have any chance? This point is completely correct. What can defeat a person can be either absolute strength or selfishness. Similarly, what can defeat a family or a country can be either absolute strength or selfishness from the inside. Li Chenglong said, once we find the problem, we can deduce from this point. Li Chenglong pointed at some of the black dots at the top of the drawing and said, these represent the absolute upper echelons of the astral souls, the Yunduan family. Perhaps when the Yanwu Empire was first established, these clans were the descendants of the founding ministers of the empire. That is why they are so glorious today. At the very least, they are the relatives of the second and third generations of the emperor, or even the descendants of those who had made outstanding contributions. Or perhaps, it is the accumulation of generations of the families of the feudal officials. That is why they became such an unshakable clan. But it's undeniable that these families have made great contributions to Xinghan in the past. In the past, they must have done a lot for the country, or they must have done a lot for the country to be able to have such a status. Let's not talk about this point anymore. Li Chenglong said, after all, every family has a history of growth. But the rise of a family in the beginning, it's almost impossible to succeed by scheming and plotting. Yi Chongqing nodded silently. Li Chenglong's understanding was very fair. The birth of too many clans was inevitably the starting point of blood and flesh contributions and sacrifices. There was no doubt about this. After the foundation was built, the accumulation of generations led to the current situation. Since ancient times, the civil and military have been at odds with each other. Can be said that this is inevitable. It's not that everyone wants to be at odds with each other, but it comes from the scheming of the emperors. This is common. This is the beginning. But as long as there is a beginning, even if the emperors want to settle this dispute, it's already impossible. That means it can only continue. Even if some families don't want to fight, they still have to fight. Because if you don't fight, you will be trampled. This is a helpless reality. So this is not darkness but reality. These are the skills that these families have to master if they want to survive. They have to fight. Because the glory of the ancestors cannot be lost. Because the future generations have to rely on the struggles of today to continue and last for generations. So this has nothing to do with darkness, it's just reality. Li Chenglong said very clearly. Yi Chongqing sighed softly. In the beginning, it was indeed like this. And these Yunduan families, once they started to fight, what they fought for was something that ordinary people couldn't see. Naturally, they couldn't understand it. So, the impact of this competition on the lower class people wasn't very big. But as the competition became more detailed, it started to spread to the lower class. And Vice Principal Gao, under this background, obtained the position of Hidden Dragon. We have to see that Vice Principal Gao didn't come to Hidden Dragon because he wanted to, but because of the Gao family's operation that facilitated this result. Li Chenglong now gave people a cold and calm feeling, but also had the aura of a person who was full of vigor and vigor. The Gao family's operation of the family members to come to Hidden Dragon was not to overthrow Hidden Dragon, but to use this place as a springboard. This is because Hidden Dragon's political achievements are too easy to obtain. Every student who comes out of here is a genius. Every one of them is fought over by all parties, and most of them are outstanding people who have achieved great results in their own positions. And these are all things that the leaders who came here to gild their names can use to add a glorious political achievement to their qualifications. Although no matter who comes, these political achievements will be obtained. But there are many who want to come, but not many can come. Because this kind of talent is a holy land, even the upper class of the empire doesn't want to tarnish it. But to come to Hidden Dragon, some people have to be pushed down because there aren't many people who can obtain great political achievements. There are only a few people in total. So, at this time there are schemes, and the real conspiracy, or rather the real saboteurs. To put it more clearly, if the UMNO alliance wants to enter, they have to start from this point. So, from this point on, there is a loss of control. Because although these upper-class families want to use Hidden Dragon as a springboard, they don't want to become enemies with Hidden Dragon. And once there are serious consequences, if there is an unresolvable hatred, these families won't be afraid. And the next step of conflict will be formed. And in this process, how many people are adding fuel to the fire, how many people are pushing the boat with the current, these are unknown. But in a short period of time, these families want to obtain positions and political achievements, that's all. This is the process of a multi-party game. On one hand, the big families are scheming against each other, obstructing each other, and obstructing each other. On the other hand, the local forces of Hidden Dragon are also putting in effort to fight. And the UMNO alliance is doing their best to make things happen. Of course, there are also some small families who want to use this opportunity to get close to the big families and pave a golden path for their own families. And the UMNO alliance is our common enemy. No one can deny this. Even the families who are scheming won't let this go. And if there is a chance, they will do their best to find the people from the UMNO alliance and at the right time resolve the hatred with Hidden Dragon. These are all schemes, all points that need to be considered and can also be the key to compromise with each other. Li Chenglong took a deep breath. With these intertwined forces, a complicated situation like an inescapable net is formed. In such a game, the so-called good and bad, right and wrong, gain and loss, the dividing line is really very, very small. But our current focus is only on Vice Principal Gao. We don't need to think about those deeper levels for now. With the return of Vice Principal Xiang Quangren, There is a conflict between the other vice principals. This is no doubt the point of this battle. Chapter 483. Because Vice Principal Xiang was very aggressive. He wanted to kick them out of the power center of Hidden Dragon City. Once they were kicked out, all their previous efforts would be in vain. This was unacceptable to them. There was no possibility of compromise. So, the first possibility is that Vice Principal Gao conspired with another party or even several parties to get rid of Vice Principal Xiang. Then, he was used and schemed against in the process and was seriously injured. Could even be said that if he wasn't lucky, he would have died. His death would be the biggest topic of discussion. But the second possibility is that Vice Principal Gao really didn't know about it this time. Someone else conspired with Vice Principal Gao and sent someone to pretend to be Vice Principal Xiang. Because Vice Principal Xiang's words were heard by many people. And at that time, Mr. Wen Xingqian even got angry at Vice Principal Xiang because of this sentence. This incident really left a deep impression on people. Li Chenglong sighed. In other words, this is the fundamental difference between a pure teacher and a schemer. Because this sentence is really a plot node that can be used. I think Vice Principal Gao also had a deep impression of this sentence. So, if someone pretended to be Vice Principal Xiang, they didn't even need to say anything. A hint and a specious move could make Vice Principal Gao predict the person in front of him. Vice Principal Gao could even realize the truth in an instant and instinctively realize that this was a great opportunity to get rid of Vice Principal Xiang. So, he shouted out Vice Principal Xiang's name and cooperated perfectly. Li Chenglong said, "These two possibilities exist and have a high probability of happening." Zhuo Xiaoduo and Yi Chongqing both nodded slowly. If Vice Principal Gao conspired with someone, then as long as he woke up safely, the person who conspired with him would be exposed. And that person wouldn't allow it. So no matter how strict the Gao family's defense is, as long as the other party wants him dead, he won't be able to live. Li Chenglong said, "From this we can infer that if Vice Principal Gao woke up successfully, it proved that he didn't know about this matter. He just cooperated for his own benefit." Yi Chongqing kept nodding. The more he listened, the more serious he became. The other thing is, the Qi Seeker who advised Vice Principal Gao's family on feng shui is also an obvious target. But Zhuo said it in front of so many people in the Gao family. I believe that even if Vice Principal Gao wakes up, he won't be able to find that person in the entire continent. Because in order to fool a person like Vice Principal Gao, first of all you have to have a very deep understanding of the Qi examination art. At the same time you have to be very famous. Secondly, they need someone to introduce them to Vice Principal Gao, and then Vice Principal Gao will take the initiative to look for them. There aren't many Qi watchers who have this kind of status in the entire continent. And this person's idea is a dead end. As long as Vice Principal Gao continues to act, his entire family will be wiped out. I'm guessing that even if this person doesn't belong to the Umno Alliance, he must be on the opposite side of the astral souls. There's no doubt about that. Zhuo Xiaoduo nodded slowly. Li Chenglong's inference was basically the same as his. I'm guessing that Zhuo's instigation should be effective, but to what extent? It will depend on Vice Principal Gao's specific actions after he wakes up. Li Chenglong said so. What we need to do now is only one word: wait. However, while we are waiting, those families who participated in the operation before can still observe. After all, to send this big head lay back from Shangjing to deal with Vice Principal Xiang requires a lot of strength and a very tight deployment. This line itself is an important node. Li Chenglong said. Yi Chongqing smiled. The Minister of Shangjing South is already secretly investigating this matter. Now we're also waiting for the results. This matter undoubtedly involves a lot of people. If we really go up against those big families, even the chief of Shangjing South doesn't dare to brandish his butcher's knife easily. There are too many people involved. Yi Chongqing smiled bitterly. The roots are intertwined and the joints are intertwined. But this time a lot of things have been exposed. We can still investigate based on this. Li Chenglong said. For this kind of thing, the most terrible thing is to pull out a thread. As long as the thread is out, we're not afraid that they won't continue to act. Because they're afraid. And as long as they're afraid and want to extinguish the thread, they'll act. As long as they act, we'll have a chance to follow the vine to the melon and dig out the whole thread. Li Chenglong smiled. So it's okay for us to wait. So be it. However, the Gao family only received bad news after waiting for so long. For a week, the real bad news kept coming. Mrs. Gao was in charge of the Gao family. Half of her originally black hair turned white at a speed visible to the naked eye. The so-called feng shui of the Imperial Dragon Pond was quickly dismantled and filled up under the command of Master Pang. The sun and moon stone was transported to the northernmost part of the big courtyard. It was watered with the blood of many Gao family descendants and buried deep underground. The blood was collected by the 3 sons of Vice Principal Gao who cut their wrists. It was more than 2 kilograms of blood. The original Imperial Dragon Pond was not only filled up, but also dug 20 meters deep before it was filled up. Then, a large amount of fertile soil was transported to backfill it, turning it into fertile soil. They were preparing to plant sunflowers on it. In the future, this place would only be used as a flower bed. They hoped to use the slight power of the rising sun from the sunflowers to increase the yang energy of the main house. Further west, a stone tablet was built. On it was engraved the ancestral teachings of the Gao family's first-generation ancestor before he died. Blood to water the sun and moon bridge. Do not refuse to serve Yanwu. Death on the battlefield should be with a smile. Death on the battlefield should be a man's blade. Future generations must remember. Killing the witch thief is a hero. Their whole life is for the country and the people. Only then can they be worthy of the surname Gao. Strictly speaking, the ancestors of the Gao family did not have any literary talent to speak of. This poem was to a large extent pieced together with rhymes. In the eyes of a true scholar, these sentences were almost unbearable to look at. But the hidden fierceness of the poem was on the verge of bursting out, especially the feelings of serving the country and the people. It was impossible to erase them. Erecting the ancestral teaching tablet here was also a declaration of the Gao family's determination. They hoped to use this to offset the backlash of the feng shui. But the misfortune of the Gao family did not lessen. At least on the surface, it was completely useless. First, 3 of his grandsons were killed in a nightclub out of jealousy. Later that night, 2 of his grandsons got into a car accident on their way home, and both of them died. On the second day, the people who received the message to go home had already arrived near their house. Only then did they relax slightly. They planned to find a Joe restaurant to fill their stomachs. But they met their enemies who they had not seen for many years, and their entire family was killed. The next night, the 4 great-grandchildren of the Gao clan disregarded the ban and went out to gamble. They got into an argument with some people at the gambling table. Although they managed to kill more than 10 people from the other side because they were outnumbered, they were eventually chopped into minced meat. On the 3rd day, everything was peaceful. More and more of the Gao family's descendants returned home safely. It was also because of this peaceful day that many people let down their guard. But on the 4th day, the 8th grandson of the Gao family found a fugitive when he entered the city. He wanted to catch the fugitive, but the fugitive was secretly accompanied by an expert. He was killed on the spot. On the 5th day, the bad news of the deaths became fewer and fewer. But many of the family businesses started to have problems. The capital chain was broken, people ran away with money, or were attacked by rival companies, or were poached by unfriendly forces. The Fenghai Bridge that was built by a son-in-law of the Gao family suddenly collapsed. It was confirmed that it was a shoddy project, and the entire company was investigated. Everyone in the Gao family had gathered at the Gao family's old mansion, but everyone's faces were gloomy, and it was rare to see anyone else. It was truly one bad news after another that kept coming. People couldn't help but feel that the heavens wanted to kill them. Even the most unruly and disobedient people were now as well behaved as quails. All the family's advisors gathered together, nervously analyzing the situation and planning countermeasures. There are too many things that seem to be coincidences. There are no traces of the enemy's plot at all. Many of the conflicts and sudden deaths were caused by the young masters of the family, who took the initiative to provoke the conflict. Before the conflict, no one had even seen them, so there was no plan. It's really luck. Mrs. Gao ordered to announce the conclusion of her deduction in front of the whole family. No one went against you. From the beginning to the end it was all your own fault. That's all. Mrs. Gao let out a long sigh. Her tone and expression were full of sorrow. Looking at the hall full of descendants in front of her, all of them were lives. They seemed to be the family's reproduction, the family's hope. It seemed that the Gao family was so prosperous. But Mrs. Gao only felt dispirited and powerless. The words that Swordsmanship said when he came in were like slaps on her face, one after another. There are so many people in the Gao family. There are so many people. What does that mean? Perhaps Swordsmanship was just sighing casually at that time. But now, Mrs. Gao only felt her face burning. Yes, there were so many people. They did nothing every day. How could there not be many people? How could there not be many people who enjoyed the peace brought by the sacrifice of others every day? Could it be that there were not many people in the Xiang family? Could it be that there were not many people in the Shi family? There were so many families. Which family had fewer people? But now these families had very few people. The old were old, the young were young. It wasn't that they didn't have many people, but most of the men in these families had died in the battle at the Sun Moon Pass. Many families, starting from their ancestors, had sent their men to the Sun Moon Pass to enlist in the army. It was as usual. Generation after generation of men had spilled their hot blood on the Sun Moon Pass. They had no regrets. Chapter 484. For example, the Dongfang family. For the past 3,000 years, thousands of men from the Dongfang family had died in battle at the Sun Moon Pass. Another example would be the Nan family. The Nan family was once the Southern Grand Marshal, and now the Minister of Finance. Everyone knew that the Nan family held a high position and was very powerful. However, no one knew that the Nan family chief had more than 30 brothers of the same generation. Now, only the Nan family chief was left alive. The others were all in eternal slumber at the Sun Moon Pass. The principal of Hidden Dragon High School, Yi Chongqing, was now living with his wife. He only had 3 great-grandchildren and 2 great-granddaughters. His son, grandson, daughter-in-law and granddaughter-in-law were all in eternal slumber at the Sun Moon Pass. There were many more. And the Gao family still had so many people. There are so many people in the Gao family. Swordsmanship's words usually sounded like praise for having a lot of people. However, when faced with such a strong enemy, your family still has so many young and strong men. They had cultivation, martial arts, and strength. They lived freely in the rear, eating, drinking, and playing. Even now they died in nightclubs, casinos, and drinking tables. Some even died on the bellies of women. How sad. Grandma, we must take revenge. We must take revenge. How dare they target the Gao family? We must not let them go. Vice Principal Gao's eldest grandson's eyes were filled with hatred. When this period is over, we must take revenge. Our brothers and nephews can't die in vain. Mrs. Gao was stunned. She looked at her eldest grandson with eyes full of mockery. Revenge? Ha. They died in nightclubs and casinos. How can they still have the face to talk about revenge? Mrs. Gao suddenly exploded. All the men in the family, go kneel in front of the ancestral tablet. Think about what you have done all these years. No one is allowed to blink. Go and see what the ancestral tablet says. How much of the glory of the Gao family's ancestors is left? I have not cared about the Gao family for so many years. However, I still remember that I am the granddaughter of Marshal Shiman. I am the daughter of the military. When your grandfather wakes up, I will settle the score with him. What's the point of raising a bunch of trash like you? Other than humiliating yourself, other than ruining women, other than muddling along, fighting for power, framing the good and oppressing the weak. What else can you do? Your Gao clan? Even sitting here right now makes me feel ashamed. Mrs. Gao slammed the table. Now all of you get out. The second madam smiled apologetically and said, Eldest sister, there's no need to make such a big fuss over nothing. Our children are always by your side safe and sound. It's better than going out to fight and kill. Hee. All these years it's all thanks to you guys for spoiling them. They are a bunch of good-for-nothings, vermin of the country. It's all thanks to you. When old Gao wakes up, if you guys don't leave, I will. Mrs. Gao's face was stern. She closed her eyes and let out a long sigh. Madam, Master is awake. In the nutrition cabin. Vice Principal Gao finally moved and opened his eyes. Mrs. Gao said coldly, if she's awake, so be it. Just continue to recuperate. He turned around and said sternly, everyone, go kneel in front of the ancestral tablet. If I don't say anything, no one is allowed to get up. Immediately. Immediately. As he spoke, he stood up and left in a huff. However, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Since he was awake, he should first recuperate and recover a little. Only when his body recovered could he better deal with the situation. The Gao clan was already in deep trouble. If old Gao did not make a corresponding change, destruction would really happen in an instant. Mrs. Gao, who had been enlightened, clearly understood this point. Zhuoxiao's feng shui theory was being proven step by step. Many people had died in the Gao clan. This was an ironclad fact. However, the number of casualties was nothing compared to the Gao clan's thriving population. If the entire Gao clan's fortune was exhausted and they still did not change, they would definitely face an extreme backlash from their fortune. When that time came, all these people would die, including herself. During this period, Zhuo Duo and Li Chenglong behaved exceptionally well. Basically, they went to school and left school together. At most, Zhuo Duo occasionally went to have lunch with Granny Shi. Other than that, they did not go anywhere else. They just practiced, and compressed. Li Chenglong finally broke through to the embryonic breathing realm 2 days ago. This breakthrough to the realm was basically unspeakably easy for him. There was no obstruction at all. After the breakthrough, Li Chenglong felt that his strength seemed to have taken a huge leap in a sudden somersault. His ability had increased by at least 3 times. After practicing for a period of time, he felt that he had already consolidated his current realm. Finally, he could not hold back his arrogance and challenged Master Zhuo. Come. Zhuo Duo Yu Xiao Xiantian, I, an embryonic breathing expert, will give you some pointers. The consequences were obvious. Li Chenglong, who wanted to show off, kicked an iron plate. A newbie in the embryonic breathing realm was directly beaten to a pulp by a senior Xiantian. Do you still dare to be arrogant? I don't dare anymore. Are you still arrogant? I was wrong. Challenging me. Zhuo Duo snorted and said, let me tell you, Swamp, I have killed more embryonic breathing realm cultivators than you have ever seen. This is not an exaggeration, it is the truth. Yes, this was not an exaggeration. The number of embryonic breathing realm and inner core realm cultivators who had died at the hands of Zhuo Duo was really quite high. Li Chenglong's face was full of resentment. Li Chenglong was absolutely invincible in Class 1. Except for Zhuo Duo. Even if Xiang Chong and Xiang Bing joined forces, the 2 overlord halberds combined, they could not withstand Li Chenglong's bare fists. Today, he had broken through and wanted to take advantage of the time when his ability had skyrocketed and Zhuo Duo had not broken through yet to gain the upper hand. However, when he went up against Zhuo Duo, he was beaten up badly in just a few moves. Moreover, he was told that Zhuo Duo had already been merciful. How could Swamp endure this? You should break through quickly. Li Chenglong said, when you break through, you will probably be able to defeat Huayun, right? Zhuo Duo's face was deep and meaningful. I should be short of 100 million points. He. Even if Li Chenglong did not mention it, Zhuo Duo was about to break through. He had a feeling that his dantian was almost completely full. It was the kind of situation that was close to being substantial. He had to break through a new meridian and form a new cycle in his body to allow the spiritual energy to undergo a qualitative change before he could continue to progress. Every advancement was a qualitative change. This was an inevitable state. I will suppress it one last time and break through tomorrow night. Zhuo Duo wanted to drag it out. This was because he still felt a little unsatisfied. Although the number of times he suppressed it was already more than expected, even with this time, he had only suppressed it 32 times. It was still too little. That night, Zhuo Duo practiced various moves in the Tower of Annihilation. He exhausted his spiritual energy to the maximum limit and practiced until he was exhausted. Then, he took out the top-grade jade of astral souls in the Tower of Annihilation to recover. This was what he had been doing all this time. It had to be said that the space of the Tower of Annihilation was extremely quiet and the space inside was very large. He did not have to worry about anything when he was practicing here. He could be completely focused. Zhou Xiaoduo liked this place more and more. He did not even need to clean the place when he was practicing here. The jade of astral souls would directly absorb it into powder and scatter it on the ground. After more than 10 days of continuous absorption, the powder had accumulated. Zhou Xiaoduo vaguely felt that something was wrong. Where was the jade of astral souls powder? He would shake off a huge pile of powder every time he practiced these days. But where did the powder go? As he thought of this, Zhou Xiaoduo could not help but widen his eyes. After absorbing the jade of astral souls powder, it could be said that there was no spiritual energy left in it. However, the texture of the powder was still the jade of astral souls. If all of it was collected, it could be sold and used in some special industries. For example, the construction of the jade of astral souls nutrition cabin was made of highly compressed and condensed parts of the jade of astral souls powder. It had an excellent effect of conducting spiritual energy. However, this was only a small number. Most of the jade of astral souls powder was directly thrown away. This was because in the hands of an ordinary martial artist, it was simply trash and useless. However, how could the jade of astral souls powder that he had left behind during his practice disappear without a trace? If he had not acted rashly today, he would not have discovered it. Zhou Xiaoduo was on high alert. He subconsciously sniffed. There seemed to be another smell in this space. That was a very, very faint scent. That belonged to grass? However, there were no other living things in the Tower of Emptiness other than himself. Where did this fragrance come from? Zhou Xiaoduo was even more surprised. He turned over and lay on his stomach on the ground. He began to dig around. There was originally nothing in the place where he was standing. It was an extremely hard material that he did not know. It felt like mud had turned into concrete. But now that the ground under his body was actually soft, it felt very different from other places. Was this the effect of the jade of astral souls powder? Zhou Xiaoduo looked at it again and again. He found that under the powder, there were faint specks of green. Green? Zhou Xiaoduo was even more shocked. Wasn't the space of the Tower of Emptiness supposed to be devoid of spiritual energy? Were there no living creatures or plants? But what was with these specks of green? For a moment, Zhou Xiaoduo did not know what to do. He did not know if this change was due to the jade of astral souls powder. That was why such a strange situation had occurred. In the next moment, he rushed out as if he had gone mad. He rushed out and collected the star soul jade powder that had already filled half a pond in the courtyard, and stored it all into the space-destroying pagoda's space. It's still too little. Zhou Xiaoduo could not help muttering to himself as he watched the jade of astral souls powder disappear in a short time after he had poured it in. I think I've discovered something incredible. Looking for monthly votes, recommendation tickets, and subscriptions. I wanted to update at 7, but there are less than 2,000 words left. I'll go home tonight and update tomorrow morning. Chapter 485. Zhou Xiaoduo took a deep breath. In the beginning, the Tower of Annihilation did not have any additional functions. Other than being able to store living things, it was only a super large storage space. However, the fact that it could carry living things was already extraordinary. At the very least, there was oxygen in this space. It could allow people to survive and even live. When Yi Chongqing used this space, he mostly practiced martial arts or meditated in it. After all, to practice and absorb spiritual energy, one had to do it outside. Because outside, one could absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth at the same time while practicing. The increase in effect was incomparable to that of the Tower of Annihilation. After all, to practice in the Tower of Annihilation, one could only bring in their own resources. There was a huge waste problem. It was a waste of time and resources. Therefore, he did not practice in the Tower of Annihilation at all. However, when the Tower of Annihilation fell into Zhou Xiaoduo's hands, it was very different. Because Zhou Xiaoduo had a lot of secrets and trump cards, and most importantly, he was rich and powerful, the abnormality was revealed. In practicing martial arts in the Tower of Annihilation, Especially during this period of time, Zhuo had consumed so much top-grade jade of astral souls that it could fill a car. He did not care about the waste at all. He only cared about the progress. He was too lazy to come out to practice and then go back in again. However, his cultivation and absorption speed were also very fast. This caused the consumption of the jade of astral souls to increase. As a result, after so many days and months of accumulation, he finally made such a special discovery. Regarding this change, Zhuo was not shocked. Instead, he was very happy. He could see clearly that the little green spots were some grass seeds that had been brought in. They had just started to germinate and were very weak. There were already signs of withering. However, if they could germinate, it meant that this space could grow. This discovery made Zhuo pleasantly surprised. Could it be that the true intention of the Tower of Annihilation was actually this? In fact, the Tower of Annihilation had already taken shape. It just lacked the necessary filler. The powder of the Jade of Astral Souls? Will the effect of the Jade of Astral Souls be better? Zhuo thought for a while and threw in 2,000 upper-grade Jades of Astral Souls. Then, he went out of the Tower of Annihilation to sleep. The next morning, he went in to take a look and found that the upper-grade Jade of Astral Souls had not been touched at all. However, the powder of the Astral Souls that he had thrown in earlier had disappeared without a trace and turned into soil in the space of the Tower of Annihilation. It's fine if the Jade of Astral Souls has completely absorbed its powder, but not if it's a complete Jade of Astral Souls? What kind of logic was this? There doesn't seem to be any difference between the two, right? After all, Zhuo was not involved in scientific research, so he knew nothing about it. But to him, it didn't matter whether he could do it or not, as long as the result was okay. I don't care what the reason is. Whatever works, I'll do it. How simple is that? The next day, he went to the Hidden Dragon High School to ask around. How do you deal with the remaining Astral Souls jade powder after the cultivation? How do you deal with it? Xiangcheng, Xiangbing, and the others were confused. Just throw it away. How else can you deal with it? Where do you throw it away? Wherever you can throw it away. Do you think you can save it up and sell it for money? How much is that? Yes, although there was a market for the Astral Souls jade powder, only places that used the Astral Souls jade powder on a large scale would collect it. Usually, after the cultivation, the amount of Astral Souls jade powder left was very small. There was no value in collecting it. Yes, the powder pond in Zhuo's house was originally dug by Li Chenglong. It was just a prank. He wanted to see if it could be filled up after 4 years. These things were really worthless. Zhuo felt that his question was equivalent to not asking. Where do the cultivation trash of the Hidden Dragon High School students go? Every dormitory class has a trash bin. The school has a special handyman who collects the cultivation trash and daily trash every day. Xiangcheng said. Oh, Zhuo's eyes lit up. During the lunch break, Zhuo went to find the handyman who collected the trash for the Hidden Dragon High School. He didn't expect this person to be a middle-aged boss. After all, the Hidden Dragon High School students threw away too many things. Many things were thrown away without batting an eye. However, in the eyes of ordinary people, these things were extremely valuable. Therefore, collecting trash in the Hidden Dragon High School was also a big job. The profit was quite good. In the Hidden Dragon High School, they didn't need to spend a single cent to collect the trash. After they were collected, they would be sorted and sold for a lot of money. Class monitor Zhua, do you need something from me? The boss was very humble in front of Zhuo. Zhuo was famous in the Hidden Dragon High School. His status was respected. How could this boss not know the current number 1 person in the Hidden Dragon High School? To put it bluntly, Zhuo only needed to say one sentence. Find someone else to collect the trash. He had to get lost. How could he not curry favor with him? I want the cultivation trash you collect. I want the powder of the Astral Souls jade. Yes, I want it for my experiments. Zhuo casually made up a reason. Okay. The boss let out a sigh of relief. He thought it was something serious. That was it. Among the things he collected every day, this was the most common. The key was that this thing had a very low recycling value. There were only a few commercial uses for it. The supply far exceeded the demand. There was no way to sell it at all. The things that fell into his hands were basically used to fill the holes outside the city. He had to collect a few carts worth of them every day. Now that Swishaoduo said he wanted it, it was actually a good thing for him. At least he had a connection with Swishaoduo. Yes, you can collect it at your place. I will collect it once every 2 or 3 days. Do you have a place to store it? Yes. Where did you throw the powder from before? Outside the city. There is a special place for it. I threw it all there. Where is it? That afternoon, Swishaoduo took a rare day off. He went directly to a mining area in the south of the city. There was an extremely huge and spectacular collapsed pit here. No one knew how deep it was. Carts carrying the powder of the astral soul's jade constantly came and poured it down. Most of the powder went straight into the deep pit. The remaining powder on the ground was immediately shot by someone with a high-pressure water gun. Then it turned into mud soup and fell into the deep pit. Fuck. Swishaoduo was greatly disappointed. So this was how it was handled. Directly sweeping it into the sinkhole was really once and for all. There was no future trouble. This made Swishaoduo, who wanted to directly fill up the Tower of Annihilation, extremely disappointed. Why don't you do something else? After cursing, Swishaoduo immediately went to the boss's waste collection shop. Asked the other waste collection shops. Tell them to keep all the astral soul's jade powder they have on hand for me. 1 cubic meter, $50. How about that? Swishaoduo asked. No problem. The boss took charge and said, actually, we don't need so much. In the past, this thing had commercial uses. It could be used as a special building material. However, with the large-scale mining of the astral soul's jade and the in-depth research, its use as a special building material has declined rapidly. We want to collect it and ship it out for free to fill up the sinkhole outside the city. We have to pay the transportation fee ourselves. $10 per cart is already a lot. Then I'll leave it to you to negotiate. I'll still pay you $50 per cart. You can take it all. It's your business how much you want to collect. Any leftovers will be your service fee. That's settled. Swishaoduo said indifferently and made the final decision. Okay. Thank you, squad leader Zwa. Well, my only request is that during the acquisition process, you must not expose my existence. Just say that a big boss wants to use it for research purposes. Swishaoduo reminded him. However, as he continued to collect more and more in the future, it was destined that it would be impossible for him to keep it a secret. Swishaoduo didn't expect to keep it a secret completely, or even for too long. However, if others wanted to ask him what he was going to use it for, Swishaoduo felt that he could keep this secret forever. Strictly speaking, Swishaoduo didn't know the significance of the astral soul's jade powder to the space of the Annihilation Tower. That afternoon, Swishaoduo collected 3 carts and put them directly into the Annihilation Tower. Back at the villa, Swishaoduo couldn't wait to go in and see what was going on. He realized that it seemed like the pile was too thick and didn't show any signs of reducing. He waved his hand and dispersed all of it. He wanted to see what would happen if he collected too much of the astral soul's jade powder. Or would there be an unexpected miracle? That afternoon, Swishaoduo chose to sleep in the Annihilation Tower. Tonight, he prepared to suppress it one last time before breaking through to the embryonic breathing realm. The final painful aftertaste, followed by the breakthrough that followed closely behind, Swishaoduo wanted to conserve his energy. He carefully observed the environment before he fell asleep and remembered every detail. Then he lay down and fell asleep. After he woke up, he made a comparison to see if he could find any clues. This time, Swishaoduo slept exceptionally soundly and relaxed. In the Annihilation Tower, he didn't have to worry about being ambushed. There were no safety concerns, so he was at ease. Just as he fell asleep, he started to dream again. Naturally, he met that person again. In the clouds, a Xiaolong appeared sneakily. Once he appeared, he wagged his tail in front of Swishaoduo and flew here and there. His cute little eyes were full of flattery. Brother, why are you ignoring me? We are good friends. Xiaolong felt wronged. Good friends? You flatter me. I've always been the one giving you benefits. When have you never given me any benefits? How can you be considered a good friend? Swishaoduo rolled his eyes and said with conviction, I'm really poor. Xiaolong complained. Go play somewhere else. I don't know if it's your nature as a dragon, or if it's your habit to lie with your eyes wide open. Zhuo Xiaoduo simply ignored him. However, Xiaolong, who was ignored, suddenly became excited. In the past, when he said this, Zhuo Xiaoduo basically kicked him out of the dream. However, this time he didn't kick him out. This was an improvement. This meant that there was a chance. Chapter 486. It wasn't that Zhuo Xiaoduo didn't want to kick him, but if he followed Li Chengming's instructions and kicked this guy out, he would wake up as well. If he wanted to sleep again, he would have to toss and turn for a while. At this moment, Zhuo Xiaoduo intended to conserve his energy and didn't want to waste any time. I've already transformed your space. Isn't it a great benefit? This is my gift to you. Xiaolong seized the opportunity to claim credit. Huh. Zhuo Xiaoduo was stunned. Transformed space? You transformed my space? You're bluffing. It's really me who transformed it. Xiaolong looked aggrieved and murmured, there's not the slightest bit of life in here, but there's a limit to how long it can last. Sooner or later it will collapse. I saw that you liked this thing, so I drew all the remaining Earth Dragon Chi from the Dragon Vein in Dongxi to you. Otherwise, how could your dead space have signs of life? Xiaolong chattered on. I spent a lot of effort to draw the remaining chi of the Earth Dragon here. It's so tiring. Huh. Zhuo Xiaoduo sobered up a lot. You mean, the change in my tower is not because it absorbed the Astral Soul's jade powder, but because of you? Absorbed the Astral Soul's jade powder? Xiaolong was stunned. How could this be? I only drew in 1/3 of the Earth Vein. How could it have this function? Then he rolled his eyes and said, I don't know about this. But I'm sure that the increase in vitality is the result of me drawing in the chi of the Earth Dragon. We are good friends. Of course I should help you. TSK. Why should I believe you? I think it's the power of the tower itself. What does it have to do with you? What's the point of being so greedy? Zhuo Xiaoduo snorted. Do you think you can fool me with your flowery words? Do you think I'm so easy to fool? I'm telling the truth. Xiaolong shook his head and wagged his tail as if he had been wronged. He began to ramble on and on about how hard he had worked and how important the geomantic convergence chi was to this empty and lifeless space. Zhuo Xiaoduo gradually began to believe it. However, his face was still full of disbelief. I don't believe it. Do you think you can do whatever you want? Unless you have other benefits to offer. Xiaolong was at a loss. What other benefits could he offer? Baby. Spirit medicine. Jade of Astral Souls. Mineral deposits. Zhuo Xiaoduo said. All of the above are fine. Xiaolong didn't understand what Zhuo Xiaoduo was talking about. He said, I don't understand. Zhuo Xiaoduo wanted to take out some treasures, spirit medicine, heavenly treasures, and so on for this guy to take a look. However, he found that he didn't have any high-grade heavenly treasures in his space ring. He had no choice but to take out a piece of Jade of Astral Souls. Do you have this? Xiaolong stretched out his white claws and scratched the Jade of Astral Souls. He said, I know where to find this. There are a lot of them, but I can't take them out. You know where to find them? There are a lot of them. Zhuo Xiaoduo was greatly astonished. He inexplicably found out some incredible information. I'm the spirit of the Earth Veins. Of course I know where to find special mineral deposits. Xiaolong was very proud. Since you're the spirit of the Earth Veins, why can't you take out the mineral deposits? Zhuo Xiaoduo said angrily, Are you playing with me? Xiaolong's expression became more and more aggrieved. I'm just a spirit. I can't carry anything heavy. I can only control the power of Qi meridians. Zhuo Xiaoduo's expression said, You're talking nonsense. Do you think I'll believe you? Last time I saw you sitting on a pile of shiny gold with my own eyes. Xiaolong came to a sudden realization. Are you talking about those shiny things? Yes. Most of them are fake. Xiaolong was so sad that his eyes turned red. I'm just a spirit. How can I have those shiny things? Those are all my imagination. I know those are good things. I'm just fooling myself to increase my happiness. Happiness? It's all your imagination. Zhuo Xiaoduo was completely shocked. You imagined a mountain of gold with all kinds of treasures on it. Then you sat on the mountain of gold and pretended to be a rich man? Fooling yourself? How could there be such a thing? Could it be that you're an idiot? Xiaolong was very melancholy. He said, I can't even pick up a gold coin. How can there be a mountain of gold? Really? Really? Xiaolong was about to cry. Do you have to keep asking me about my saddest things? I love those things the most, okay? They're shiny and shiny. Sob, 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 I want them so much. But even if I see them, I can only see them. If I could pick them up, I would have a mountain of gold long ago, okay? Swishaoduo said disdainfully. Then what do you have now? After all this time you don't have anything. Poor dragon. What a waste of my providence points. Poor dragon immediately shut himself up. Do you have to be so direct? We're good friends. Even if I really don't have anything, I really treat you as a good friend. I'm still young. Xiaolong said sullenly. Are you no longer a spirit when you grow up? Can you pick up tangible things? Swishaoduo snorted and directly stabbed his heart. Xiaolong's grievance reached its peak. He curled up like a snake and suddenly burst into tears. Wah wah wah. Swishaoduo was shocked and had goosebumps all over. You can cry, but can you not make such baby sounds? Xiaolong cried. I've been crying like this since I was young. I don't know how to cry in other ways. Then don't cry. Swishaoduo's eyes darted around. He said, don't you know where this black stone can be found? You can tell me the location and I'll go and dig it up. If I get it, I'll benefit from it. Even if you give me benefits, I'll naturally return the favor with good friends. Xiaolong said suspiciously, but your eyes are darting around. That's a sign that you're up to no good. If you want to scheme against me, I'll have to think about it. Shda. Swishaoduo sweated. You can even tell? Could it be that my acting skills have deteriorated? That can't be. I'm an award-winning actor. Unless you give me a drop first to show your sincerity, Xiaolong said as he wiped his tears with his two paws. Swishaoduo immediately became gloomy. This guy wasn't easy to fool. Don't think that I don't know that the black stone you're talking about is very valuable in your hands. Very, very valuable. Xiaolong was no longer sitting cross-legged. He sat with his two paws like a duck and continued to wipe his tears with his two paws. And it's very useful, very useful. You used this kind of stone to cultivate before, but it's not as good as your black stone. Swishaoduo snorted and said, isn't it the same stone? What's the difference? You're too pretentious. When Xiaolong heard this, he actually rolled his eyes in a very human-like manner. This guy is really bad. Friends. Humph. No one would lie to me like this. Luck points are easy to talk about. I just don't believe that you know where this stone is. Swishaoduo continued to bluff. Xiaolong was not convinced. Of course I know. I'm not afraid to tell you that the black stone I know is even blacker than the one in your hand. I often go to sleep in it. It's very comfortable to sleep in there. Swishaoduo raised his head proudly. I don't believe you. Seeing is believing. Xiaolong. If you don't believe me, then forget it. Swishaoduo. Damn, he didn't play by the rules. Couldn't he just say something like, if you don't believe me, I'll bring you there to take a look? At least tell me the general location, right? We haven't agreed on the terms yet. Xiaolong peeked out an eye from between his paws. Fuck. Swishaoduo made up his mind and said, bring me there and I'll give you a drop. That won't do. Xiaolong said, there are many of these black stones there. You only gave me a drop. It's not enough. Are you still good friends? You're so petty. Okay, just tell me how much you want. Swishaoduo asked. Xiaolong hesitated for a long time. How much do you have now? This dragon actually wanted to take everything. Swishaoduo's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately flew into a rage. This is a dream. This is a dream. This is a dream. With a poof, the dream instantly shattered. Swishaoduo, who had woken up, cursed loudly. This is too much. Too greedy. How can there be such a greedy thing in the world? I'm so angry. Do you think it's easy for me to earn some providence points? Just as he was cursing, there was a soft pop, and a long-awaited refreshing feeling enveloped his body. 4 drops of providence points fell from the sky in succession. In an instant, Swishaoduo's body felt extremely comfortable. His meridians also expanded, And his dantian also expanded a little. Awesome! Awesome! Zhuo was pleasantly surprised. It was 4 drops in succession. How could there be so many? However, even if he thought about it with his knees, he would know that this was for the Gao clan. The providence, feng shui and so on had all come true. What's more, Vice Principal Gao should have woken up, and at the same time, had acknowledged his statement. Otherwise, it would be impossible to get 4 drops of providence points at once. This was simply timely help. Zhuo was so happy that he almost cried. He even forgot about the resentment that originated from a certain dragon. What blacker stone? Go and play with it. That night, Zhuo might have been in high spirits because of the joyous occasion. He compressed his innate genuine qi one last time. In the end, after the compression was completed, he was shocked to discover that there was still a little gap. This was a situation that had never happened before. It was probably these 4 drops of providence points that caused his meridians to expand and his dantian to expand as well. Although the gap was very small, Zhuo still didn't waste it. He went through the thorny path again and compressed it to the point where it couldn't be compressed anymore. Finally, at 5:30 am, he officially began to break through to the embryonic breathing realm, suppressing the innate realm, the thorny path, 35.5 times. Strictly speaking, the last time couldn't be considered the last time. This was Zhuo's limit, breaking through to the embryonic breathing realm, the boundary between immortals and mortals. A barrier. This was truly a barrier for ancient martial art practitioners to be reborn. Chapter 487. A huge flow of spiritual energy entered his meridians. Zhuo's accumulation was too deep. Once he let go of the suppression, the suppressed spiritual source rushed out like a flash flood. It was like a dam bursting, like the opening of the floodgates of the Yangtze River. The barrier of the embryonic breathing realm only resisted for less than half a second before it was easily broken through. The turbulent spiritual energy rushed into the brand new meridian route. The meridian, which was originally empty, was instantly filled up by the spiritual energy that rushed in. Then it was pushed forward with the force of emptiness. With a poof, 2 streams of black blood spurted out from Zhuo's nostrils. Almost at the same time, countless tiny black spots were expelled from the pores on the surface of his body. Every breakthrough of a large realm was a natural cleansing of the meridians and marrows. The turbulent spiritual energy washed through the meridians again and again. After the impurities were expelled from the surface of his body, a faint fog started to appear. As the spiritual energy went through one cycle after another, Zhuo's entire body was shrouded in white fog. As time went on, the clouds above his head gradually rose and accumulated, forming a cotton-like thing above his head. Then it slowly changed, slowly forming pieces of lotus leaves. It was like the surface of a lake in the morning, rippling slightly with the undulation of the lake water. There were more and more lotus leaves, gradually forming a huge patch above his head, almost occupying the entire space in the bedroom. Yi Chongqing, who had been secretly protecting him, stared with his eyes wide open. What was the point of having so many lotus leaves? Why didn't he hurry to condense the 3 flowers above his head? He didn't even need the lotus leaves. Did this brat even understand the crux of this? Under the gaze of Yi Chongqing, the lotus leaves were still gently shaking. From the gaps of the lotus leaves, flower vines started to emerge one by one. Then a small flower bud appeared on top of them. As the flower vines grew longer, thicker, and bigger, the flower bud on top of them also grew bigger. However, Yi Chongqing, who saw this scene, was stunned. What was this situation? The so-called 3 flowers gathering acupoint and 5 qis collecting origin was a common practice in the cultivation world. However, this brat had condensed 9 flowers at once. 9 flower buds. Are you trying to defy the heavens? However, Xiao has broken through to the embryonic breathing realm at the innate realm. Can your spiritual power really do that? This was too arrogant. But at this time, he absolutely could not be disturbed. Once he was disturbed, all his previous efforts would be wasted. Yi Chongqing prayed in his heart. It wasn't easy for a genius to appear, so he mustn't play himself into a cripple. Under Yi Chongqing's focused gaze, one of the flower buds gradually grew bigger, And then bit by bit, it became a budding bud, and then the first petal bloomed, then the entire flower was in full bloom. Stop. It was so realistic. Even the veins on the petals and the pollen on the stamens were clear. Then the second, the third, the fourth, every flower bloomed very quickly and perfectly. It rushed out, branched, and grew. Then the flower bud began to grow and bloomed. There seemed to be an endless amount of spiritual energy supporting it. It was endless, and there was no possibility of shortage. In front of Yi Chongqing's dumbfounded eyes, 9 lotus flowers, each as big as a bowl, were placed in the bedroom, slender and elegant. The whole process only took the time to brew a cup of tea. Yi Chongqing felt that his worldview had been turned upside down. How was this possible? In a place where he couldn't see, Zhuoxiaoduo's energy center was circulating the 9th cycle, and the flow of spiritual energy was getting faster and faster. At the center of the energy center, a Shao-sized vortex was slowly forming, and this vortex started to spin at an extremely fast speed, as if it was spinning crazily. It swept up a large amount of spiritual energy into the energy center, and after one round it was immediately thrown out from the other side. As the vortex rotated faster and faster, the flow of spiritual energy in the meridians also became faster and faster. The fiery red spirit qi flowed rapidly like magma. In the end, it even produced a sound that was no different from the rumbling of thunder. And the vortex in the energy center continued to rotate. Slowly, after a total of 999 cycles, Zhuoxiaoduo felt that in the center of the vortex in his energy center, a Shao-sized particle had started to appear, gradually condensing into a substance. Yes, it could only be said to be close to a substance, but it still hadn't reached the stage of a pure substance. And all the true core power was still rotating, also that it could be condensed and condensed to the extreme. And this process was named by the ancient martial art practitioners as embryo formation. At this point, it was the true meaning of the embryonic breathing realm. And Zhuoxiaoduo's true core power circulation didn't have any intention of ending, and it was still roaring and surging. After an unknown amount of time, the flow of the true core power finally slowed down. And at this moment, the embryo formation in the energy center had already become the size of a peanut. It shone with a red light and a golden light. The lotus flowers on top of Zhuoxiaoduo's head started to shrink one by one, then the lotus leaves, then the fog. Finally, all the strange phenomena on the outside disappeared, and the spiritual qi in the meridians in his body started to circulate, returning to its normal speed. Only then did Zhuoxiaoduo slowly exhale, and this exhale was green in color. It was like a long dragon spurting out, directly piercing a hole in the window opposite. Yi Chongqing, who was guarding behind the window, was almost hit by the last of the turbid air that was spat out. Principal Yi couldn't help but curse in his heart. This brat couldn't have discovered me, right? Otherwise, how could he have spat out so accurately? Facts had proven that Principal Yi had thought too much this time. How could Zhuoxiaoduo have the ability to discover such a strong person like Yi Chongqing? Now, his whole body and mind were still immersed in the excitement and joy, and he didn't have any other thoughts. Not bad. Quietly using the inner vision technique, he examined his energy center again and again. His energy center, which was originally filled with dense fog, now had a faint feeling that it was bright and clear. Pieces of red clouds floated in his energy center. The red clouds were abnormally thick, and they were so red that they were purple. Piece after piece, layer after layer from top to bottom, there were a total of 9 layers thick. And in the centermost position, there was another red, round bead that looked like a pellet, slowly rotating on its own. The speed of rotation was consistent with the speed of the vital qi flowing in the meridians, shining and shining, and it was a marvelous sight. It's really too cute, too amazing. Zhuoxiaoduo paid full attention to that round red bead. And he even wanted to take it out and play with it. If it were to play with a marble, he felt his own strength, and with a little bit of qi, the red bead in his energy center would rotate faster, and then the spiritual qi in his meridians would surge majestically like the Yangtze River. But in an instant his whole body was filled with explosive power, and he faintly felt like he had to vent it out. He felt it for a while. Zhuoxiaoduo muttered to himself, after breaking through to the embryonic breathing realm, the power level is indeed different. The explosive power now is at least 10 times more than before. If I don't care about the consequences and go all out, I should be able to cause even more extreme damage. No wonder everyone wants to break through to a new realm. It turns out that one's own realm has such a huge impact on the combat power level. While Zhou Xiaoduo was muttering to himself, Yi Chongqing, who was outside the window, almost couldn't help but go in and give him a beating. At least 10 times more? Do you think everyone is as abnormal as you? After a normal person broke through, their strength would increase greatly, but to be able to break through the limit of one's original strength by 2 times was already very commendable. Moreover, one still needed to continuously train to be able to integrate this new strength into one's own and use it to its fullest potential. A situation like yours where your strength increased by more than 10 times after breaking through is no longer a step to the sky, not a demon, not a defiant, but a legend. A legend, understand? Zhou Xiaoduo grabbed his phone. What the heck, why is it not even 6 o'clock? So, breakthroughs are actually so fast. I thought it would take quite some time. Behind the window, Yi Chongqing's expression changed again. Then he left silently. He was afraid that if he didn't leave, he would most likely rush in and beat this bitch to death. He had never seen such a cocky person. Breaking through so fast? How dare you say that? Do you think everyone breaks through as fast as you do? Which one of them didn't suffer endless torment and succeed in breaking through with great difficulty? Which one of them didn't make themselves half dead and spend a lot of time to break through before succeeding? Even after succeeding, they still had to thank their luck. Have you ever seen someone who was stuck at a bottleneck and couldn't break through for decades? Have you ever seen someone who was stuck at a high-level bottleneck and couldn't break through for a lifetime? This little bitch. He was just asking for a beating for speaking so bluntly. Li Chenglong shouted from downstairs, Zhua, let's go, let's go. It's time to go to school. I'm coming. I'll be right there. Zhou Xiaoduo was really agile. With a light swoosh, he had already taken off all his clothes. Then the spiritual energy in his body surged, and a spiritual mist enveloped his body. His entire body was clean and refreshed. With a shake of his arm, he instantly put on another set of clean clothes. When he reached out again, a strong suction force suddenly appeared in his palm, and the heavy chair that was originally placed beside the desk was sucked into his hand. He weighed it in his hand and found that it was as light as a feather. Ha 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 ha. Zhou Xiaoduo looked up to the sky and laughed. Nian cat. I can do it too. I can do it. Ha ha ha. I can do it too. I can do it. Ha ha ha. Downstairs, Li Chenglong, who heard someone's arrogant words, was dumbfounded. He subconsciously looked at his crotch. Then he saw Zhou Xiaoduo appear in front of him like a ghost. With a wave of his hand, he said confidently, let's go. Let's go to school. Zhou Xiaoduo was really proud and high-spirited all the way. Moreover, his steps were graceful and carefree. The two of them leisurely arrived at class 1. Zhou Xiaoduo pretended to let Li Chenglong go in first. Then, when the class was full, he put his hands behind his back and pretended to be reserved as he walked in with swaying steps. His face was filled with a faint smile that was as calm as the wind and as calm as the water in an ancient well. In any case, he was just acting tough. This posture was basically telling everyone, don't move. I'm going to start showing off. Chapter 488. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Zhou Xiaoduo stood tall and straight. His face was handsome, and his demeanor was elegant. He stood on the podium with his hands behind his back. His face was cold and arrogant. Wretch. Yu Yan'er and Zhen Piapiao both made disgusted sounds at the same time. He was quite handsome. But what are you trying to do by acting like, I'm going to start acting cool? What are you trying to do? Who wouldn't be disgusted by it? Especially when everyone already knew the class monitor's character. Why was he pretending? The two small white thunder tigers in the arms of the two girls actually let out 2 growls to show their disdain for this king of swords. Zhou Xiaoduo didn't mind at all. With a smile that made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze, he walked up to the podium with his hands behind his back. At this moment, when Xingtian, who was already standing at the door, was dumbfounded. What was the meaning of this class monitor standing on the podium that belonged to the teacher and saying a few words every day? Was he planning to usurp the throne? Was he going to rebel? Students, I have a very good news for you today, Zhuo said happily. Maybe you can make a guess? The 20 people below were speechless. Guess my ass. Forget it. I'll tell you directly. I've broken through to the embryonic breathing realm, Zhuo announced loudly. His words were full of pride and arrogance. I've broken through to the embryonic breathing realm. Did you all hear that? Wen Xingtian, who was at the door, was very excited when he heard that. This guy, I even told him to let me know when he was about to break through. He actually broke through silently by himself. It was indeed great news. With my breakthrough, I only need one hand to deal with all of you in the future. Zhuo laughed maniacally. Ha ha ha. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? The 20 people below had black lines on their foreheads, and their faces changed from that of an old-fashioned society. Zhuo picked up a black pen and started to write on the whiteboard behind him. With one hand behind his back, he wrote smoothly. He said reservedly after breaking through, I'm overwhelmed with emotions. I'm writing a poem here. A poem was written on the whiteboard with a wave of his hand. Invincible in the innate realm. A legend in the embryonic breathing realm. Who is the most beautiful in the hidden dragon class 1? There is only Zhuo in the world. After Zhuo finished writing, he threw the pen to the ground and laughed heartily. He walked down the podium, his whole body brimming with joy. That wildness was truly carefree and uninhibited. It had the feeling of, I'm going out laughing at the sky, we're not ordinary people. Behind him, a voice suddenly, when Xingtian said, Where are you going? Quickly come up and clean the whiteboard. Pick up the black pen. Who are you to throw my black pen? Why are you arrogant? Are you itching for a beating again? Hearing this, Zhuo felt as if he was struck by lightning. He stiffly turned around and looked at the door. He saw Wen Xingtian's cold and murderous face. Zhuo rushed up to the podium without a word. He wiped the whiteboard clean at lightning speed. Then he picked up the black pen and handed it to Wen Xingtian with a flattering face. Teacher 1, I didn't realize you were here just now. I was just imparting some cultivation experience to my classmates so that they won't be bullied by others when they go out. Wen Xingtian snorted. You really have good intentions. Why aren't you scramming? Hey! Zhuo immediately went to his seat. The 20 people's shoulders trembled. A few girls lowered their heads. Their long hair covered their faces. They laughed so hard that their bodies trembled. When Xingtian coughed and said, Why don't you practice with him, Teacher Zhang? Mr. Zhang Wensheng immediately became excited. Okay, that's right. You have to take it easy. How can I not know that? When Xingtian waved his hand and called Zhuo over, Teacher Zhang wants to test your ability. As he said that, he threw out 2 swords. One was a regular alloy long sword, and the other was a lighter long sword. Naturally, they couldn't use their personal weapons in this contest. Zhuo's weapon was a rare divine weapon. If Teacher Zhang's sword was broken, it would be terrible. Teacher Zhang obviously misunderstood. He laughed softly. Old one, you are so attentive. You are afraid that I will break his sword. When Xingtian rolled his eyes and didn't comment, Zhuo picked up the light sword and bowed. Thank you for your teaching, teacher. Teacher Zhang chuckled and said, You can just use your best sword moves. You don't have to worry about attacking me. I heard from Teacher Wen that you have just entered the embryonic breathing realm. Have you consolidated your foundation? Yes, teacher. Zhuo straightened his long sword. His left hand held the scabbard and his right hand held the sword hilt. He gathered the sword will in his heart and activated the heart of the sword. His back straightened. His long sword hadn't been unsheathed, but his whole person was like an unsheathed long sword, standing between heaven and earth. This was the heart of the sword that originally belonged to Qin Fangyang. Now Zhuo had assimilated it into his own understanding and formed his own style. Seeing this, Zhang Wenqing's eyes lit up. What a good seedling! Clang! Zhuo unsheathed his long sword. It was clear and melodious like a dragon's roar, but with a faint sound like thunder. At this moment, it made people feel that the sky was covered with dark clouds. Thunder roared and lightning flashed. Although it hadn't started to rain yet, there was already a humid air between heaven and earth. This is water attribute? Teacher Zhang Wenqing's expression became more and more surprised. This was because he cultivated water attribute martial arts. In the next moment, Swordsmanship brandished his long sword and executed a series of wonderful moves. In an instant, the heaven and earth began to drizzle, and the rain mist gradually spread out. Seeing this, Wen Xingtian and the other two teachers retreated 15 feet away. Teacher Zhang Wenqing's long sword flashed. He forcefully broke into the rain mist. His sword slanted and accurately aimed at Swordsmanship's throat. Swordsmanship's body moved and swayed. He continued to activate the sword will of the drizzle sword. Together with his sword, he blended into the rain mist. The surroundings became foggy, and one's vision couldn't be seen clearly. Ding ding ding, the sound of swords clashing could be heard constantly. It was the sound of two swords clashing. Teacher Zhang's aura kept changing. In less than 5 seconds it had already changed 3 times. Only then did it stabilize. The other two teachers widened their eyes. Department head Wen, this student of yours is really monstrous. Old Zhang's cultivation isn't at the top in Hidden Dragon Academy. However, his comprehension of sword heart is one of the best in Hidden Dragon Academy. In less than 5 seconds he was forced to use an Origin Core Realm sword will that is 1 tier higher than his. This level of attainment in the way of the sword is truly frightening. The younger generation will surpass us in time. When Xingtian didn't even look at him. Instead, he stared at the other 20 people fighting and said calmly, "This is only the beginning. Just an Origin Core Realm sword will is not enough." The two teachers were speechless. Wasn't this a little too much? Even if this student's swordsmanship was extraordinary, or even bizarre. It was continuous and dense, and it covered the heavens and the earth. It seemed soft and powerless, but it was actually filled with killing intent. The two teachers could tell that if it was a fight to the death with an opponent of the same cultivation realm, Teacher Zhang would have already died under his sword. Swordsmanship's swordsmanship became sharper and sharper. The zhenqi flowing from his body was endless. In less than half a cup of tea's time, he had already unleashed his full strength. His might was much stronger than before. It was as if it was drizzling. As the might of Swordsmanship's swordsmanship increased, Zhang Wenqing's aura also increased by a notch. The pinnacle of the Origin Core Realm. Teacher Zhang Wenqing also felt like he had seen a ghost in his heart. This was simply inconceivable. Ordinary new students who had just entered the academy would be able to teach them sword techniques with ease. They would be able to do it without using any strength at all. Even if they were in the realm of martial masters, they would still be able to easily defeat their enemies. Even if he was a student in the embryonic breathing realm with his experience, understanding of the way of the sword, and self-control of the sword technique, he would still be able to handle it with his martial master realm. However, when he faced Swordsmanship, he realized that he was at an absolute disadvantage when he used his martial master realm power at the start. He could lose at any time. Then, he raised his sword to the innate realm. But the situation didn't improve at all. He was still completely restrained. The other two teachers were even more speechless. "Old Zhang, you are teaching a student sword technique. Why are you the one who raised his realm 4 times? The teacher is relying on his high cultivation, and the student's swordsmanship is extraordinary. This is the opposite. What happened to lifting something heavy as if it was light?" Monthly votes. Recommendation votes. Today is Monday. Give me a few more recommendation votes. Chapter 489. Teacher Zhang Wenqing was getting impatient. In the beginning they had only exchanged 2 swords, but he had already fallen into a complete disadvantage within these 2 swords. Then, he raised his realm to the embryonic breathing realm, increasing his power by 10 times. The situation improved slightly, but he was still restrained. Even now, he had already reached the pinnacle of the primordial elixir realm, but he still felt a little shaky. This was simply incomprehensible and unbelievable. Didn't they say that he had just broken through to the embryonic breathing realm? But what was the meaning of the sword breaking through the void and the sword will soaring to the sky? What was the meaning of the heart integrated into sword? Could it be that he had been practicing swordsmanship since he was in his mother's womb? Zhou Xiaoduo was in high spirits. Suddenly, he let out a long howl and performed 7 to 8 different sword techniques in succession. He used them interchangeably and randomly. The first one was grand and imposing, the second one was treacherous and sinister, and the last one was tricky and weird. Then it was a surprise attack. Zhang Wencheng, who was caught by surprise, was flustered. Helpless, he suddenly roared and raised his power to the nascent soul realm. Then, he raised it to the intermediate stage of the nascent soul realm, and then to the advanced stage of the nascent soul realm. Only then did he suppress Zhou Xiaoduo. But it was only a suppression on the level of power. In terms of sword techniques, it was no longer a suppression. Zhou Xiaoduo's swordsmanship didn't only have a variety of styles and endless transformations. It had already reached an extremely high level. If Zhang Laoshe were to use his swordsmanship to counter a single move, he would have to use at least 3 moves in order to deal with it. However, he still wouldn't be able to stop the other party's continuous swordsmanship. What the hell? What the hell? The sound of the two swords clashing became more and more frequent. The two teachers who were watching from the side had already changed from speechless to dumbfounded and speechless. 15 to 16 collisions in a moment? Is this really old Zhang's teaching battle with a student? Is this the nascent soul realm? He has long been at the advanced stage of the nascent soul realm. I didn't expect the difference in their swordsmanship to be so great. Zhang Wencheng's voice was full of excitement and joy. Do you know how to control the sword? Zhou Xiaoduo hesitated for a moment. I can't control it for now. Use it. Zhang Wencheng shouted. Let me see your attainments in the imperial sword technique. As soon as he finished speaking, a dazzling brilliance suddenly lit up in the air. All the rain and fog around them were absorbed by the brilliance like rivers flowing into the sea. Zhou Xiaoduo's figure appeared. His sword shook continuously, and with a humming sound, he and his sword turned into a huge beam of light that soared into the sky and shot down. On the other side, Zhang Wencheng quickly drew circles with his long sword. Circles of sword energy condensed and shot towards Zhou Xiaoduo's beam of light. Obviously, he intended to form layers of sword net with continuous sword qi to eliminate Zhou Xiaoduo's abundant attacks. Unfortunately, the fierce attack of the sword qi dragon far exceeded Zhang Wencheng's expectations. It instantly broke through the layers of defensive sword qi and rushed over. Zhang Wencheng shouted loudly, and the brilliance of his long sword suddenly flashed, and the aura around his body was unprecedentedly majestic. He brazenly slashed out with his sword. With a loud bang, Zhou Xiaoduo's entire body rolled like a gourd on the ground. He was directly pushed back more than 30 meters, plowing a trench in the ground. The sword in his hand was directly broken into 2 pieces. On the other side, Zhang Wencheng stood with his sword in hand. He smiled guiltily and said, "You also know that people who practice swordsmanship always have some small flaws. Some like to pretend to be cool, some like to be cool, some like to be elegant, some like to be elegant, some like to be divine. In short, everyone more or less has some flaws. The purpose of the existence of us teachers is to correct these flaws. But Zhou Xiaoduo doesn't have any of these flaws. His execution of the sword can only be described as practical. What's more than 90% of his swordsmanship is aimed to kill. His previous swordsmanship teacher is really admirable." Zhang Wencheng said from the bottom of his heart. For example, if this is a small tree, then his previous teacher has already removed all the branches that would affect his growth. Now he only needs to absorb the maximum amount of nutrients and grow quickly. There's no need to do anything else. At this point, he added, I'm specifically referring to his swordsmanship. When Xingtian made a sound of acknowledgement, but there was a hint of doubt in his voice. This kid's swordsmanship is already at its peak. But this child should also practice other weapons. And his attainments in them are even stronger than his swordsmanship. Zhang Wencheng took a deep breath. If it's an ordinary student, we should advise him to specialize in one skill. But this Zhou Xiaoduo doesn't need to worry about that. He has the aptitude and qualifications to practice multiple martial arts simultaneously. What's the specific direction of his next step? When Xingtian asked humbly. Obviously, he wanted to verify his opinion and see if it was the same as Zhang Wenqing's. Zhang Wenqing pondered for a long time and said, "What's left is to continue nurturing the sword intent and sharpen the heart of the sword. You can only rely on your own grinding skills for these. In terms of skills, other than speed and precision, you can only lift heavy as if it's light, lift light as if it's heavy. You need to control these skills over a long period of time. It's not something that can be taught with words." When Xingtian's face immediately warmed up, Zhang Wenqing's insight was indeed sharp. What he said was exactly the same as what he had expected, without the slightest difference. "Do you have a specific training plan? Enter the gravity room." Zhang Wenqing didn't hesitate. Enter the gravity room directly. Oh, so extreme? His swordsmanship is complex and exquisite. In fact, he is already heading in this direction. It also shows that he often entered the gravity room to cultivate in his original school, which is why he could achieve this effect. Now that the direction is clear, he only needs to maintain the same progression as his original path. Then, entering the gravity room directly won't cause too much of a burden. Of course, if he can carry weights, the effect will be even better. When Xingtian nodded slowly, Teacher Zhang's thinking was exactly the same as his. There was really no difference. He was indeed an experienced teacher for many years. He has already broken through. He can indeed enter the gravity room directly. When Xingtian nodded silently, "But this student, how did you train him?" Zhang Wenqing was very impressed. He has just entered the embryonic breathing realm. How can he have such powerful strength? Such a deep foundation, it's as if it's endless. After saying this, he quickly shut his mouth. He wanted to say that he almost killed him. But thinking about it, this sentence was too embarrassing, so he couldn't say it out loud. When Xingtian stood with his hands behind his back, his face calm, he thought to himself, "If I say that this has nothing to do with me, that would be really embarrassing. Moreover, if I remember correctly, this brat should have been suppressed 34 times in the thorny road. But how can I tell you such a terrifying truth?" Zhuo Duo dragged half of his sword and his cracked thumb and thumb. He asked humbly, "Teacher Zhang is really brilliant. Please give me some pointers on my shortcomings." He was speaking from the bottom of his heart and didn't discount anything. Since he started practicing swordsmanship, he had encountered many enemies and sparred many times. But to be able to directly hit him with a sword and send him flying, and he was still in the state of sword manipulation at that time. Zhang Wenqing was the first. "Zhuo Duo, may I ask who was your previous swordsmanship teacher?" Zhang Wenqing was very impressed by Zhuo Duo's previous teacher. Qin Fengyang, Teacher Qin. After saying this name, which he hadn't heard for a long time, Zhuo Duo couldn't help but miss him. What is Teacher Qin doing now? Where did he go? Is he okay? This Teacher Qin is really amazing. Zhang Wenqing praised sincerely. To be able to fix the student's shortcomings and send him over. This foundation is impeccable and extremely stable. Zhuo Duo's cheeks trembled subconsciously, thinking of the days when he was dominated by Qin Fengyang in Phoenix City. He couldn't help but feel a burning pain in his buttocks. Then his whole body reacted. Right? Proper, right? No shortcomings? Those were all created by being beaten up. After all, you just broke through. After 3 days of self-adjustment, use your credits to enter the gravity room to cultivate. You don't have to participate in the class's collective training anymore. When Xingtian instructed in a deep voice. Yes. Gao residence. Chapter 490. Vice Principal Gao had already fully awakened. Once he regained his consciousness, he would be able to circulate his energy to heal his injuries. Using the autonomous mode to resist and heal his injuries, his recovery speed would naturally be much faster. Currently, he had already exited the nourishment cabin and was lying on his bed to recuperate. He held a few pieces of high-grade star soul jade in his hand and circulated his energy to absorb them, replenishing the energy he had expended during this period. Mrs. Gao, on the other hand, was keeping watch outside. During this period of time, the bad news about the Gao family had never stopped. All of them were accidents, and all of them brought trouble upon themselves. Then there was an 80% chance that they would be killed on the spot. Mrs. Gao blocked all the bad news from the outside so that they wouldn't disturb Vice Principal Gao. Mrs. Gao only had one way to deal with all the bad news. She only accepted it and didn't give any orders to deal with it. She especially didn't allow anyone in the family to go out and seek revenge. She suppressed all the bad news one by one. From the days Wuxia Duo came for fortune-telling until now, there had been a total of 45 accidents and disputes in the past 10 days. 8 companies went bankrupt, 32 people died, and 5 or 6 people were seriously injured and in a coma. The bad news was like a tidal wave, wave after wave, each higher than the last. Almost all the members of the Gao family who were outside were affected. The married daughters of the Gao family hadn't died yet, but there were still some bad things happening. But today, it seemed that the bad luck had come to an end. There was no news since morning. Mrs. Gao finally breathed a sigh of relief as she watched the sun set. When she entered the room, Vice Principal Gao had already finished his meditation. He asked with a gloomy face, "Any more bad news?" "Not today," Mrs. Gao said lightly. "Could it be that I've really been cheated all these years?" Vice Principal Gao paced back and forth. "Gao Zhiyun, don't you know what you've done all these years? God is watching. When the time comes, retribution will come. How can it be false?" Mrs. Gao said bluntly, "You damaged the interests of the Hidden Dragon School for your own power. Do you really think there's no retribution? It's fine if you want a position, but why do you have to damage the school?" Vice Principal Gao said in a low voice, "The family arranged for me to come here. What can I do? Do you want me to give up the family mission and betray the family?" "Family mission? The clan arranged for you to come here so that you could occupy a position. When did we ever allow you to stir up trouble? As long as you work diligently as a teacher, you will naturally have students all over the world. When the time comes, you will naturally be rewarded." Mrs. Gao said bluntly, "But what have you done? Other than fighting for fame and profit, what have you contributed to the Hidden Dragon High School?" The fact that you've continued to help the Gao family is probably the greatest contribution you've made over the years." Vice Principal Gao remained silent for a long time as regret flashed across his face. "Now that you've been sold and used, do you feel good now?" Mrs. Gao snorted. "You almost lost your life. Do you feel good now? Happy now?" Gao Zhiyun's face darkened. "You still have to ask if I was really tricked. Someone set up a feng shui scheme for 18 years. I didn't see it coming. You're really something. Someone is willing to spend 18 years to scheme against you." Mrs. Gao snorted. "And I didn't see it coming. There was no trap at home, but you went out to find someone to dig a hole for you and then jumped into it yourself. You're really promising." Gao Zhiyun's face darkened even more. It was as black as the bottom of a black pot. As for what Wuxia Duo said, you've also seen the video of that day. What do you think? Does it make sense? Is that what happened? Mrs. Gao asked discontentedly. "You don't have to tell me your answer. After watching it, you were like a taciturn gourd and didn't say a word. That's equivalent to giving me a clear answer. The only thing I want to hear now is who exactly you found back then. I'm really interested to know who was so awesome as to set up such a feng shui scheme to end the family line." Vice Principal Gao sighed deeply and said, "It's hard to explain in a few words." His face was gloomy. After a long time he muttered, "Wuxia Duo is always right." Sigh. Mrs. Gao said angrily, "Then what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for death?" Vice Principal Gao was silent. He didn't move for a long time. "I can tell you that the continent is now in a battle that concerns the survival of the astral souls. There's no retreat. And Hidden Dragon, Yunyun, and Ancestral Dragon are the top martial arts schools. Many years ago, I heard from my family that this is a battle of fate between 2 or even 3 continents. Since it's a battle of fate, these top martial arts schools and the cradle of talents are the origin of fate. Do you think that no one is watching you while you're jumping around here?" Mrs. Gao sneered and said, "You're dreaming. Let's not talk about others. There's the Department of Martial Arts, the Military Department, the Star Shield Department, the Shadow Department, and the Supervision Department. Which one of these departments isn't watching? Why didn't they do anything to you? Don't you know in your heart? Do you really want to wait until the day your family is exterminated? Of course we're waiting for the big fish behind you. How many times have I reminded you? You're still stubborn. You only care about climbing up the ranks according to your family's request. Can you climb up the ranks? Do you think the power you have in your hands is real? Chapter 491. The Gao Family of Generals. It was a title from a long time ago. What was the Gao family's ancestral teachings? Again, Gao Zhiyun used all his strength to get up from the bed and slowly walked out of the door. He walked west. There was a newly erected ancestral teachings tablet. Before he got close, he heard complaints. Why are you kneeling here? What's the use? You've been looking at these words all day. No matter how great your ancestors are, they can't jump out from this tablet, right? What's the point of these ceremonies? Besides, our ancestors fought bloody battles to conquer the world. As the descendants, shouldn't we enjoy the glory of our ancestors? We can't let our ancestors' blood be shed for nothing. That's right. If we don't enjoy it, who will? Are we going to let those whose ancestors have never been on the battlefield enjoy it? That's right, that's right. The ancestors planted the tree so that the descendants can enjoy the shade. What a wise saying. I really don't want to kneel. What era is this? What ancestral teachings, really? You have to kneel even if you don't want to. That person emphasized it again and again. It's all because our ancestors haven't woken up yet. It's her turn to use a chicken feather as a token of authority. Gao Zhiyun's face was as calm as water as he walked in. When the descendants of the Gao family saw Gao Zhiyun, they all knelt with their backs straight. No one said a word. The entire place was silent. No one dared to say anything else. Gao Zhiyun walked to the tablet and slowly knelt down. He looked up and stared at the words on the tablet. He sighed softly and read aloud. Blood irrigates the sun and moon bridge for the sake of Yanwu. Death on the battlefield should be with a smile. Death on the battlefield should be with a man's blade. Descendants of the future must remember that killing witch bandits is a hero. Their lives are for the country and the people. Only then can they be worthy of the surname Gao. From today onwards, no matter who it is, anyone who doesn't remember the ancestral teachings of the Gao family will be expelled from the family. From today onwards, all adult males of the Gao family will begin to cultivate the art of killing. When the hidden dragon goes to the front lines for training, they will go together and enlist in the army. Those who don't contribute will never return home. Vice Principal Gao completely ignored the confused gazes of the descendants. He knelt for a full hour before he stood up and bowed deeply. My surname is Gao. I am a descendant of the Gao family of generals. 2 days later, late at night, Vice Principal Gao quietly walked into Yi Chongqing's house alone. No one else knew what the two of them were talking about. However, there was a secret operation in Shangjing that eliminated a stronghold. It was said to be the lair of a famous qi gazer in the Yanwu Empire. After that, there was a series of actions, but I won't go into detail about them. For an entire week, Zhou Xiaoduo went to school during the day and entered the gravity room without asking for permission. He only came out after school in the afternoon. Hidden Dragon High School's 100 times gravity room was not only much more effective than the 50 times gravity room in Phoenix City's second high school, it was also much sturdier. In the beginning, Zhou Xiaoduo could barely move his feet when he entered with 3,000 kilograms of weight. If he had not been promoted to the embryonic breathing realm, the gravity alone would have been enough to crush Zhou Xiaoduo. With no other choice, Zhou Xiaoduo changed to wearing 500 kilograms of weight and entering the 100 times gravity room. Only then could he barely cultivate. Even in the Hidden Dragon High School, which was known as a gathering of geniuses, there were not many people who cultivated in the 100 times gravity room. Most of them cultivated in the 10 times, 20 times, and 50 times gravity rooms with weights. As a result, There weren't many of the 50 rooms that were 100 times the gravity were fully occupied. As for the 5,500 times gravity rooms, there were even fewer people who cultivated there. There were only 10 1,000 times gravity rooms which were one level higher. Ever since the school bought them, no student had ever entered them. Almost all of them were brand new. Currently, in the entire Astral Souls, the gravitational room with the highest multiplier was the 1,000 times gravity room. Every day, Duo would cultivate until he was completely exhausted. He would only come out when his whole body was like noodles. Firstly, Duo's original intention to become stronger was still the same. Secondly, it was because his credits were spent like water. The 100 times gravity room cost 50 credits for an hour. This price was like robbery. Duo spent at least 10 hours a day in the room. That was 500 credits a day. In just a week, he had used up 3,500 credits. This situation made Duo's heart ache. I only have so many credits, and I've used up 3,500 credits in a week. Now I have less than 20,000 credits left. How miserable. I'm so poor. I can't live anymore. The 20,000 credits he had obtained during his first training was definitely not enough. He had to think of a way to earn more credits. There were many times when Duo had planned to look for Wen Xingtian, Teacher 1, and Yi Chongqing to give a lecture. Why did I get so many praise, but I can only stand side by side with Li Chenglong, Meng Zhongjun, and only get 20,000 credits? What can I do with that? With the amount of praise I got, I can't even get 200,000 or 300,000 credits. This is obviously a shady deal, a huge shady deal. Especially Yi Chongqing, that old man. I gave him so many black stones, and this is how he repaid me. But he didn't dare to go even after he had gathered his courage several times. The reason was simple. The praise he turned in were all defective. If the school wanted to investigate, they could say that none of his praise were qualified, and all of them were invalid. What could he do? Now that what was done could not be undone, he could only swallow his pride. Besides, Duo understood that the school was worried that he had too many credits, and only cared about cultivating instead of going out to fight. Cultivating and going out to fight were two different paths of martial arts. Neither could be omitted. The richer the combat experience, the stronger the combat power. It was the same for cultivation. But a person who cultivated his whole life to become an expert was far inferior to an expert who polished himself on the battlefield. The gap was so big that it couldn't be measured. This week, Xiaolong came again and again after Duo fell asleep. But Duo didn't pay any attention to him. Duo could tell that this guy was pretending to be young. He was an old scoundrel in his bones. He actually wanted to gain something without risking anything. How could the greedy Duo tolerate this? Every time he came, he would chase him away immediately. When he had nothing to do, he would play with his providence points. He would put 7 or 8 drops in his hand and turn them in his palm in front of Xiaolong. When Xiaolong was drooling, he would keep it and chase him away. You want it? No way. Wait until I'm in a better mood. Xiaolong was crying and wiping his tears. He was so pitiful that he wanted to die. But Duo wouldn't budge. Don't come if you dare. But how could Xiaolong not come? The dragon vein in Fenghai City was really empty. If it wanted to grow, it had to rely on Duo's providence points. But the owner of the providence points was such a guy. What could he do? Xiaolong was so depressed that he was about to go crazy. Of course, Duo kept Xiaolong hanging because he didn't have a lot of providence points on hand when he set foot on the thorny road before, except for the ones used to help with his cultivation and pain control. Even if he added the 4 points he just earned from Vice Principal Gao's house, he only had a total of 24 points. Not to mention that Xiaolong couldn't give him any benefits now. Even if he could, Duo would definitely not trade. With such a small stock, Duo felt a great sense of crisis. He needed to have some income, but now he couldn't find time to do other things. He was too busy every day. After cultivating in the 100-fold gravity room for an entire day, his progress was far less than before. The weight he carried had only increased from 250 kilograms to 1,000 kilograms. This kind of progress made Duo feel that it was too slow. He was unprecedentedly dissatisfied. In addition, they had to collect star soul jade powder every day. In the past week, they had already collected 100 carts of it. That boss son was still very efficient in doing things. He managed to convince more than 10 other shops that collected waste. The amount of Astral Soul's jade powder that others had was naturally not as much as the Hidden Dragon High Martial School. But the amount of powder collected every day was also not little. There were at least 10 carts. Those shops transferred the Astral Soul's jade powder to Boss Sunday. They didn't have to go out of the city. Not only did they save a lot of costs, but they could also get a profit of 10 star yuan per cart. It was like money falling from the sky. Naturally, it was amazing. However, Wuxia Duo also had a request. Once the Astral Soul's jade powder was mixed with other things, they couldn't be collected. Only pure Astral Soul's jade powder was worth collecting. But for these shops, this was not a problem at all. They just had to pay attention when collecting and ensure the original taste. In this week, in the space of Wuxiao's Annihilation Tower, a boundary a little further away had been laid out layer after layer. Although there weren't many changes for the time being, all the Astral Soul's jade powder that was sent in were all absorbed by the Annihilation Tower within an hour after being spread out. It was just that no one knew where it was absorbed to. The most direct change in the Annihilation Tower, or rather the only change, was that more and more places had the same green spots that appeared before. They were ordinary grass that had just sprouted and were slightly green. Soon after, they withered and died. They couldn't survive for long. But Wuxia Duo didn't care about this. Anyway, there were plenty of these things every day. He just collected little by little. After a long time, there would be profits. Fang Yinhua called a few times during this period, but it wasn't anything important. He just wanted to report that there were fresh star beasts in the farmstead outside. Wuxia Duo also took some time out one night to use the vitality of the star beasts in the farmstead outside the city to charge the dragon blood flying dagger. Now the dragon blood flying dagger was in a bright red state. It was very pleasing. Hidden Dragon High School was very peaceful. Nothing happened at all. After Vice Principal Gao woke up, he didn't come to work. He stayed at home to recuperate. There was a change. It was the price of the high-grade Astral Soul's jade powder had increased. Now that his cultivation has increased greatly, who can kill him? Besides, there aren't any chess pieces that are that strong among the students. Should we wait for the next trial? No. After the incident with Xiang Chong and Xiang Bing, if we want to make a move during the trial, we'll only be walking into a trap. That damn Dao League, why did they do this? This is so fucking depressing. Everyone in the Heavenly Dao Union is dead. Who knows what they were thinking back then? Mo Wuji sighed. Let's take it slow and wait for an opportunity. A person who seemed to be the leader sighed. This is the current situation. It's so fucking depressing. When they first received this mission, everyone thought it was very simple. Wuxia Duo used his fortune-telling ability to solve two major problems in the Hidden Dragon High School and Martial Arts Tournament. Although only the latter one was on their side. However, the higher-ups felt that with such a person in the Hidden Dragon High School, as long as they wanted to take action in the future, they might be obstructed and interfered with. Therefore, killing Wuxia Duo became the top priority. A few of them had seen the target of this mission. He was just a small character at the peak of the innate stage. They didn't take it to heart and accepted it excitedly. However, when they arrived at Fenghai City, they realized that this small character was not simple. They couldn't make a move on him at all. Again and again, they came up with a countermeasure. Time and time again, they defended themselves strictly and closely monitored Wuxiao's movements. However, the conclusion they came up with was that most of the time, they would not be able to make a move. Even when there was an opening to make a move, it would attract the most extreme counterattack. Whoever made a move would die. Moreover, there was the premise that they might not be able to kill Wuxia Duo. This was because, according to the information, the pinnacle of the innate realm had already broken through to the embryonic breathing realm. Even though the strength of the embryonic breathing realm was still nothing in these people's eyes, when it came to instant killing, succeeding in one strike, and escaping 1,000 miles away, these people knew that they might not be able to do it. The few people who came to this conclusion felt even more depressed than a dog. Now it was them who were trapped in Fenghai City and couldn't get out. They were really at a loss. Previously, we killed the 3 dandy sons of the Gao clan. Why didn't the Gao clan do anything? Such a big clan, why didn't they take revenge? This doesn't seem like Gao Zhiyun's character. It's good to create some chaos. It's probably because Gao Zhiyun hasn't recovered from his injuries? He hasn't come to work yet. That means he hasn't recovered yet. The higher-ups told us to keep an eye on Gao Zhiyun. This time we made use of him. I'm afraid it will be difficult for our relationship to be the same as before. Tisk, who was the one who pretended to be Xiang Kuangren to kill Gao Zhiyun? Why? Didn't he kill this old man directly? If he didn't leave a tail, would we be in so much trouble today? Do you think he didn't want to kill him? Gao Zhiyun is quite a capable person. He managed to avoid being hit at the critical moment. He's really lucky that he didn't die. The most important thing is that the guy surnamed Wu went there too early. Otherwise, Gao Zhiyun would have been dead by now if he had even a second to spare. You can't do anything right, but you're good at spoiling things. Tisk, watch your words. His realm is much higher than ours. Let's continue to play the game. If it really doesn't work, we can only try it when Zhuo Duo is on his way to old Mistress Shi's place, or when he's on his way home. If there's really no other way, we can only take the risk. Zhuo Duo could clearly feel that his cultivation progress had slowed down. It was unprecedentedly slow. Previously, when he was in the Martial Master and Xiantian realm, he could fill his Dantian with spiritual energy in a few days. But now, even if he had countless high-grade jade of astral souls to help him cultivate, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth outside could be obtained as he wished, and the dragon blood flying dagger in his hand was constantly charging. But his Dantian was still empty. It didn't feel as full as it used to be. He could clearly feel a huge amount of spiritual energy flowing into his meridians like a tide. But the spiritual energy that surged into his Dantian was first absorbed by the golden pearl. Then it spun at a high speed. After one round, it turned into a faint cloud and stayed in his Dantian. But the huge amount of spiritual energy that could fill his Dantian had turned into a wisp of cloud at this moment. The difference was not just huge, it was like heaven and earth. Even if the power had increased and there was a breakthrough in quality, what kind of temper did Zhuo Duo have? If it wasn't filled, it meant that it wasn't safe. It was best to be in the state of being on the verge of a breakthrough at any time. Only then would he be more at ease. It was best to prepare and compress for a breakthrough every day. Although it was painful and bitter, the sense of satisfaction and security was real. He started to cultivate even more recklessly, draining the pond to catch the fish. It was an extremely extravagant way to cultivate. He used the high-grade jade of astral souls as a mattress. He laid on it layer by layer. Below his head and stomach were high-grade jade of astral souls. In his right hand, he held a few pieces of high-grade jade of astral souls. The only thing that wasn't holding a high-grade jade of astral souls was the dragon blood flying dagger in his left hand. In just a week, 500 pieces of high-grade jade of astral souls had turned into nothing. Well, it couldn't be said that they had all turned into nothing. Looking for monthly votes, recommendation votes, subscription votes. He even suspected that he had heard wrongly. There was actually such a shameless person in this world. Yes, but I'm a generous person. I won't be calculative. Anyway, you've already transformed it. Even if I blame you, it's useless. With your stinginess, will you compensate me? Zhuo Duo said magnanimously. Xiaolong blinked. You can be even more shameless. Once I get all of your deity, I'll empty your tower and return you to your original state. I'll let you completely return to peace. Zhuo Duo rolled his eyes. Little guy, do you think I don't know what you're thinking just because you're a dragon? You're still too inexperienced to play mind games with me. Let's talk about the conditions. Xiaolong was listless. I'll take a step back first. Otherwise, I'm afraid this human won't play with me anymore. People these days are really difficult to deal with. They're not generous at all. Conditions. How about this? As long as you find one of the top 10 herbs, I'll give you a drop of it. Of course, it'll only count when I get my hands on it. I'll give you a drop for every type of spirit medicine I get. Fair and reasonable. Fair and square, right? Zhuoxiaoduo's eyes flashed with a cunning light. No, absolutely not. Xiaolong shook his head and rejected without hesitation. I'm at a huge disadvantage. The herbs you've given me are all of the best quality. Such good stuff may not be seen even once in 10,000 years. You're actually talking about species with me. If I find hundreds of them at once, you'll only give me a drop? How can there be such logic in this world? Zhuoxiaoduo was dumbfounded. He muttered in his heart, this guy isn't stupid. We can't talk about one type. Xiaolong directly demanded an exorbitant price. 1 herb 10 drops. Bullshit. Do you think my luck points are cabbages? Zhuoxiaoduo directly started to mumble. I'm dreaming. Wait. Xiaolong's voice became sharp. We can still negotiate. But it was too late. Once again, he was kicked out of the dream by his good friend. Xiaolong was extremely depressed. If I had known earlier that this guy is a miser like me, and like me, he won't act unless there's an incentive, I wouldn't have asked for so much. Looks like I have to lower the price. It seems like this good friend of mine doesn't have a lot of those beeps. However, the ones he took out and played with today were already quite a lot. Xiaolong flipped through the collection of heavenly materials and earthly treasures that he had copied with his own method. Looking at the first 10 types, he sighed. This time he really studied it seriously. After studying for a long time, he hurried out. I have to go and look for it. Otherwise, it'll be hard to negotiate. Xiaolong disappeared in a flash. Obviously, he really put it into action and went to look for good things. Zhuoxiaoduo woke up from the dream and walked out of the Tower of Annihilation slowly. Little thing, you want to fight with me? Humph. Zhuoxiaoduo shook his head. Don't you know who Master Zhuo is? I'm just collecting money for fun. From the time Xiaolong came to find him until now, the man and the dragon had already fought more than 10 times. Xiaolong was stingy at the beginning, but now he started to take the initiative to look for the elixirs. He retreated step by step, and he was about to be defeated like a collapsing mountain. However, Zhuoxiaoduo felt that it was not enough. He still needed to suppress it. Otherwise, this stingy little devil would definitely play tricks again. Because if it were him, he would definitely play tricks. Zhuoxiaoduo put himself in Xiaolong's shoes and felt that this Xiaolong was as despicable and shameless as himself. How could he be at ease? At least for now, he was still far from being at ease. During this period of time, whenever Zhuoxiaoduo had free time, he would do his best to collect records related to the dragon vein, including some unofficial historical materials. He even let Swollen Black search Yanwu's National Library. However, the theory of the dragon vein was always limited to the terrain. No one had ever said that the dragon vein could actually condense into a dragon. Even if it was a dragon with form but no substance, there were no legends related to it, let alone any records. It was just a kind of terrain that condensed a kind of super strong luck, and it was called the dragon vein. Actually, it was more appropriate to call it the vein of luck, that this was the accepted explanation of the dragon vein. However, what was up with this Xiaolong? Not only did it condense into a form, but it could also speak. It was extremely intelligent, knew how to be petty, and liked to take advantage of others. This was already beyond everyone's understanding. It had probably never appeared since ancient times. However, it kept coming to his dreams to harass him every day. He didn't know whether it was fate, opportunity, or misfortune. Zhuoxiaoduo sighed. He was too handsome, and even a dragon came to harass him. It was really troublesome. It was Monday of a new week again. There was a commotion in the Hidden Dragon High School again. An unusual aura surged endlessly. Someone saw that Vice Principal Gao had come to work. Xiang Kuangren and Wen Xingtian were all on guard, as if they were facing a great enemy. The one surnamed Gao had returned with serious injuries. He was definitely going to do something. As usual, Vice Principal Gao attended the meeting on Monday. However, Vice Principal Gao completely ignored the hostility of Xiang Kuangren. Wen Xingtian and the others. Instead, he made a request. In December, the students of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades of the Hidden Dragon High School will go to the Sun Moon Pass battlefield training once a year. I hope that the descendants of the Gao family can accompany them. I've already asked someone to inform the front line. Once they arrive, they will immediately be integrated into the army and be disbanded for training. From then on, they will be considered as part of the army. However, they didn't join the army through the formal procedures, so the army won't send anyone to pick them up. They need to go there themselves. Therefore, I want to borrow the team of the Hidden Dragon High School to go together. Vice Principal Gao's words directly stunned everyone. Xiang Quangren and Wen Xingtian were even more confused. After being seriously injured, their brains were damaged. Were they sending their descendants to the front line to die? Don't you have any idea of the quality of the Gao family's people? If one went, one would die. If two went, two would die. Even if the whole family went, they would all die. Okay. To everyone's surprise, Yi Chongqing agreed without the slightest hesitation or surprise. In December, the Hidden Dragon High School will go to war. The students will train for 2 months. The descendants of the Gao family can accompany them. Thank you, Principal. Vice Principal Gao slowly sat down. Vice Principal Wu frowned and said in a low voice, "Old Gao, what are you doing?" Vice Principal Gao said indifferently, "There are too many people in the family. We can't afford to raise them. We'll send them to the battlefield and let them earn their own food. They're all adults. Don't tell me that they'll blindly rely on us old people." Chapter 494. Vice Principal Wu frowned and said, "But a place like Sun Moon Pass is too dangerous. Old Gao, why do you let your descendants do this? They can't make a living doing something." Vice Principal Gao let out a sigh of relief and said, "My Gao clan is also a family of generals. If our descendants don't go to the battlefield, wouldn't it be a waste of the name of a family of generals?" Family of generals? Ha ha. Xiang Quangren laughed loudly. In the past 100 years, has your Gao clan ever produced a general? How dare you say that your clan is a family of generals? You have no sense of shame. Vice Principal Wu slammed the table. "Old Xiang, what do you mean by that?" Vice Principal Wei said indifferently, "Xiang Quangren, are you trying to stir up trouble again?" Vice Principal Gao stood up and stared straight at Xiang Quangren. He said indifferently, "Old Xiang, we've always disliked each other. Today is no exception. Today I'll make a bet with you. This time, 300 of my Gao clan's descendants will follow the students to the Sun Moon Pass. The bet is that these people will either die within 3 years or someone will become a general. Since you hate my Gao clan so much, I wonder if you dare to make the bet. Do you dare to accept this bet?" Vice Principal Gao's tone was indifferent, but his eyes were bloodshot. For a moment, Xiang Quangren, who had always been a hero, was intimidated by his aura. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Suddenly, he laughed loudly. "Are you going to let me off so easily? What do you want to bet?" "Let's bet that we'll have all the best seats in the 3 continents." Xiang Quangren's pupils suddenly shrank. He slammed the table and said, "I'll bet." At this moment, more than 80% of the people present felt that they were like 2 monks scratching their heads in confusion. Could it be that they were dreaming? Otherwise, how could they have heard about such an explosive bet? The bet was already explosive enough, but the bet after that was even more shocking. All the best seats in the 3 continents. This table was the best table in the entire world. It was extremely rare to see one. It was said that no one would be able to eat it even once in 10 years. In fact, it was more than a rare occurrence. The last time this table appeared was more than 50 years ago. The so-called 3 continents best feast was a gathering of the best delicacies from the Umno Alliance, the Astral Souls, and the Tao League. The ingredients used were at least Cloud Transformation Realm Astral Beast meat. 9 precious astral beasts from each continent were used as the main ingredients, and half a kilogram of each astral beast's essence was used. There were 9 types of top-notch edible treasures in each continent, and 1 plate for each continent. There were also the sea star beasts from the 3 continents. There were still 9 species on each continent, and the essence of each species was taken. There were 9 types of edible heavenly treasures in each of the 3 continents and oceans, and 1 plate of each type. There were 9 types of star beasts flying in the skies of the 3 continents, and 1 caddy of each type of star beast was taken. Finally, there was also the spirit wine brewed from the finest heavenly materials and earthly treasures of the 3 continents. Each continent had 9 types of wine, but only this was unlimited. An ordinary ancient martial arts clan might not be able to afford such a feast, even if they had 1,000 years of history. These 2 people were actually using it for a bet. No matter who won this round, based on the wealth of these 2 clans after the feast, their vitality would be greatly damaged, and they would not be able to recover from the setback. What are we betting on? How do we win? When Xingtian added, laughing, I'll be the judge. When it's time to eat, just count me in. Everyone rolled their eyes. Fuck, I was just about to say it, but this guy beat me to it. The judge's identity was really worth it. He did not need to pay anything to be able to attend the feast. If he won or lost, he would definitely be able to bask in the glory. However, no one could tell that when Xingtian was actually helping Xiang Kuangren. Although Vice Principal Gao's words were full of emotion, it was not impossible for him to set a trap. Now that he was going to talk about the details of the bet, he wanted to expose all the hidden secrets in front of everyone. Moreover, he had snatched the position of judge to intervene and not cause the situation to be unbalanced. At the end of the day, when Xingtian still did not trust Vice Principal Gao. Let's bet. Vice Principal Gao took a deep breath, and his voice sounded like it was going to explode. Whether or not there is a general among my descendants. Xiang Kuangren, you can choose to bet or not. Xiang Kuangren rolled his eyes and said, I'll bet. Vice Principal Gao was stunned and said angrily, then I'll have to not bet. If you don't bet, you'll pay. If you bet, I'll pay. All right. It's a deal. Xiang Kuangren laughed heartily. Throughout the whole process, Yi Chongqing did not say anything. He just watched with a smile on his face. He did not say a word and did not comment. However, Vice Principal Wei, Vice Principal Wu, Vice Principal Liu, and the rest all looked gloomy. Gao Zhiyun's behavior today was a little abnormal. What was going on? Why did this guy suddenly show signs of betrayal after a single battle? Usually they would never be on the same side. Why was there such a change today? Xiang Kuangren laughed maniacally. Gao Zhiyun, I still look down on you. But since you dared to say that you're going to send your children and grandchildren to the battlefield, and even dare to make such a bet, then you're still a man. You have guts. Therefore I agreed to bet with you. However, your descendants have been spoiled for many years. It will be difficult for them to withstand the wind and rain. I'm afraid there will be a lot of losses this time. Even if you are ruthless, I can't stand it. Later, I will send them to Hidden Dragon City for recruit training. They will train until December to increase their life-saving ability. Even if they are not sharpening their spears at the last minute, it will still be good. Thank you. Vice Principal Gao stood up. Thank you for your kindness, Vice Principal Xiang. I'm not doing this for you. Anyone who dares to go to the battlefield is a man of Yanwu. If they do their best and are still killed because they are not as strong as others, we have nothing to say. However, directly throwing delicate flowers into the battlefield and sending them to their deaths is not something I would do. Because that is framing, not sacrificing. Xiang Kuangren snorted. Come and report tomorrow. I have to get rid of all the bad habits of those brats and pull out all the thorns on their bodies. Otherwise, just their bad habits alone will make the soldiers at the border laugh at our Fenghai country for not having enough people, sending these good-for-nothings to make up the numbers. What a laughingstock. Okay, who has more? Send them over now. Xiang Kuangren slammed the table. Every December, from the end of the year to the beginning of the year, was the time when the soldiers of Sun Moon Pass went home for the new year and reunited with their families. This was also the military's tradition. These soldiers who had been guarding the border for a whole year were allowed to go home. Go home and see the families they protected, the country they protected, and the prosperous era they protected. However, during this period there would be a certain period of emptiness. During this period, there would be senior students from various high martial arts organizations, as well as the descendants of various families who wanted to join the army, going to the trial. They would use this force to fill up the emptiness. This trial would last for 2 months. During this period, the UMNO alliance would also celebrate the new year. After all, they were also separated from the continent of astral souls. Everyone's customs and habits were similar. Therefore, during this period, even if there were battles, there would not be many. No one wanted to be tainted with too much blood during this period. During these 2 months, there were even many years where the troops did not fight a single battle. They just came back to feel the atmosphere of the battlefield at the border. Most of the high martial arts students spent most of their time listening to the martial artists and old women at the front line bragging for 2 months. Therefore, it was not very dangerous. However, for the students who participated in the trial, they still had to prepare for the battle with all their might. Otherwise, if there was a battle, this group of students and martial artists who went up later would definitely die in large batches. Many of the descendants of the families who had already graduated also joined the army at this time after being influenced by their families for a few years. This group of new recruits was united with the students of the high martial arts universities. It was almost a routine. And for a period of time before they left, everyone would be training together. And Xiang Quangren of Hidden Dragon High School was the vice principal in charge of this year. But these were not important. Or rather, they were not the main point. Because at this moment, Vice Principal Wu, Vice Principal Wei, and the others were puzzled by one thing. This matter for Vice Principal Gao was abnormal. No matter how they looked at it, there was a sense of abnormality. What was the reason for this? The bet with Xiang Quangren was to eat and drink a lot. Although the bet was very high, but was betting on food and drink something that would happen between Vice Principal Gao and Xiang Quangren? Shouldn't the two of them be fighting each other to the death the moment they see each other? What kind of unforeseen event happened that caused such an abnormal thing to happen? Yi Chongqing knocked on the table and said indifferently, "As for the details of this matter, you two can study it yourselves after the meeting. A school is a school, not a casino." Vice Principal Gao said, "There's one more thing." "Speak." "I came to Hidden Dragon High School to fulfill my duties as a vice principal. I don't have any other responsibilities, so I have a lot of free time. From this year onwards, I want to take on a part-time role and arrange some time to teach in the lower levels." Vice Principal Gao said, "I can teach staff techniques. I'm quite confident in this aspect." The Gao family's staff technique was also famous on the battlefield. However, it had not appeared on the battlefield for many years. Hearing this, Yi Chongqing immediately fell silent. Vice Principal Gao waited quietly. Subconsciously, Xiang Quangren wanted to stand up and curse. "You can't even teach your own son well, yet you still want to teach students? If you teach students, saying that you're leading them astray would be an understatement. You're just casually poisoning them and harming them." But when Xingtian stopped him with a look, Vice Principal Wei and Vice Principal Wu also sat up straight and waited for the next development. Gao Zhiyun wanted to directly interfere with the teaching? Was he planning to seize power from here? Gao Zhiyun was so scheming. Yi Chongqing was silent for a long time. Just when everyone thought that he would not agree, he finally said, "If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble Vice Principal Gao to teach the 2nd grade. As a new student, you don't have enough experience. I'm afraid that you'll make mistakes. The 3rd grade and above are basically set in stone.